Chapter 1957. Zhao Song. Don't go too far. Yi Wenzhua couldn't help but curse. Zhao Song looked innocent. Hey, didn't your family head ask me to raise the conditions? If I did, why are you still scolding me? Yi Wenzhua gritted his teeth. Big brother said that he could raise the conditions, but he didn't ask you to ask for too much. They were simply taking advantage of the situation. Zhao Song and the others didn't plan to negotiate with them at all. They were deliberately humiliating them. Zhao Song spread his hands. So it's because you think that my price is too high. If you don't have the money, don't take on the porcelain job. I thought the Yi family was wealthy and generous, that's why I said it. Who knew that you weren't sincere at all? His words were filled with disappointment. Family Yi was furious. It was clearly Zhao Song who was too much, but in the end he said that family Yi was stingy? What a bogus accusation. No matter how powerful Shangguan Jing was, it was impossible for him to have dozens of venerable artifacts, right? He might not even be able to get one for each of them. However, Zhao Song asked for 5 for each of them. Not to mention that family Yi might not have them, even if they did, they would go bankrupt if they took out so many. Nan Su Huai stroked his beard and didn't mind watching the fun. He laughed and said, Senior Zhao Song, if you add in the Nan family, maybe they can take it out too? The faces of the Nan family members instantly darkened. What did it have to do with them? Those words were said by Yi Wentao himself. They had already suffered heavy losses. What else did he want them to do? Zhao Song hissed and shook his head regretfully. The Nan family? They can't even protect their own family head. What can they do? Nan Heqian was furious and wanted to rush forward. Zhao Song glanced at him. What do you mean? Do you want to fight? As soon as he finished speaking, the auras of the gods beside him soared at the same time. It seemed that they really wanted to fight at any time. Shangguan Jing pressed his hand and chuckled. Hey, don't be so angry. Today I invited everyone here as guests, so let's get along well. Yu has just taken down the Peach Blossom Cove, and I reckon that she has just tidied it up recently. If there's another battle, how can it be good if our Yuer's territory is dirted? Yi Wentao's face finally turned ashen. It was Shangguan Jing who brought him here. It was obvious that he wanted to fight them to the end. Now he actually had the nerve to say such words? Dirtying Chu Liuyue's territory? Who was she scolding? Yi Wentao's self-control was excellent. No matter what happened, no matter what his mood was, he could basically maintain a calm appearance and not let anyone see any clues. However, at this moment, because of Shangguan Jing's words, the plan was broken. In fact, it wasn't because of how sarcastic Shangguan Jing's words were, but because Yi Wentao knew that the current situation was indeed very unfavorable to them. He was able to maintain his composure earlier because he was very confident that he could win today's battle. But now, it was obvious that the family Yi was on the losing end of the fight. As for the Nan family, in fact, he didn't take them seriously from the beginning to the end. Those people looked friendly on the surface, but in fact they were all in their own camps. If it wasn't for the fact that Nan Yifan was still alive and being threatened by Chu Luiyue and the others as a hostage, many of the Nan family members would have completely fallen out with them. If they really fought, those people from the Nan family probably wouldn't be of much use. Therefore Yi Wentao became anxious in his heart. Bang! At this moment, a loud sound was heard. Everyone looked over, only to see that the cyan sun-like ball of light that Yi Wentao had just unleashed had exploded with a loud bang. The Peach Blossom Dock's boundary began to shake violently. But it still didn't break. Chu Luiyue still managed to block Yi Wentao's move. Everyone's feelings were very complicated. If even Yi Wentao couldn't do it, then who else had the ability to do it? The Nan family members came to take revenge, but now they could only watch as their family head was trapped and tortured inside, and they couldn't do anything to help. Family Yi came to snatch Peach Blossom Dock, but they couldn't even break the boundary at the outermost boundary. How could they take revenge? How could they fight for it? What a joke. In addition, Shangguan Jing and the others had rushed over and were eyeing them covetously. Yi Wentao and the others were now in a dilemma. Chu Liuyue's mind moved, and the boundary flashed with light and began to devour the residual energy that was violently overflowing. After the Peach Blossom Dock's boundary was strengthened by the power of the God Annihilation Tribulation, it became extremely tough. Under Chu Liuyue's control, it could convert most of the energy into its own, and use it to repair and improve. Unknowingly, it saved Chu Liuyue a lot of trouble. In a short while, most of the surrounding energy had been devoured. The surroundings gradually calmed down. However, the people present couldn't calm down at this moment. This sister was simply an iron bastion. Even without the help of outsiders, Chu Luiyue could rely on this boundary to block most of the attacks. Yi Wentao looked at the sparkling boundary and gradually tightened his grip on the great green sun axe in his hand. It seemed that the previous plan wouldn't work. Right now, he could only think of another way. After pausing for a moment, he suddenly said, "Shangguanjing is right. If so many people attack at the same time, it will indeed cause a great impact on Peach Blossom Dock. Why don't we each pick one person to fight? The winner will become the owner of Peach Blossom Dock. The loser will leave and won't be entangled with us anymore." Digression, 6 p.m. While mobile phone users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1958. An undisguised sneer was suddenly heard. Nan Suhui looked at Yi Wentao with a half-smile. "Master Family Yi, you've got a good plan. Just now, when this old man came, you ignored me and said that you would break this barrier no matter what. Why did you suddenly change your mind when Senior Shangguan and the others arrived?" Everyone could see that the situation had changed. Even if Yi Wentao joined forces with the Nan family, it would be difficult for them to gain an advantage. The gods that Shangguanjing had invited were not just for show. If a fight really broke out, it would be obvious who would win and who would lose. After this battle, the Nan family and Family Yi would suffer heavy losses. Yi Wentao did not want to take such a risk, so he changed his mind and suggested something else. Yi Wentao was infuriated by Nan Suhui's public mockery and disdain, but he quickly suppressed his anger. That was not the most important thing right now. Only by breaking the stalemate could they turn the situation around. This was the only way he could take down Peach Blossom Dock. He took a deep breath and looked straight at Chu Luiyue. "Shangguanyu, do you agree?" He did not care what others thought because it did not matter. Since everyone believed that Chu Luiyue was the master of Peach Blossom Dock, she was the only one who needed to be questioned. It was up to her whether she agreed or not. Countless pairs of eyes fell on Chu Luiyue. Then they saw Chu Luiyue's red lips curl slightly. Her eyes glimmered as she nodded gently. All right. All right. Did she agree? Almost everyone was stunned. Even the people from the Peach Blossom Dock were shocked. She should have rejected this suggestion. Why did she agree? They clearly had the upper hand in the current situation. There was no need for them to compromise with Yi Wentao. Why, how would Master agree? 13 muttered in a daze. As he asked, he could not help but look at Cini. He saw that Cini looked calm as if he was not surprised. Big brother? 13 could not help but ask. What do you think Master is thinking? Cini's expression was indifferent. He paused for a moment before explaining. It's nothing. Master really doesn't want to dirty the new territory that has just been cleaned up. 13 was speechless. If you can solve the problem in the most convenient way, why waste your energy? Cini continued. 13 nodded thoughtfully. He roughly understood what his elder brother meant. Although they had more paragons on their side, they had a higher chance of winning. But if so many people were to really fight, it would be earth-shattering. Even if they won in the end, they would have to pay a heavy price. If he could defeat Yi Wentao in a one-on-one duel, it would save him a lot of time and effort. But the key point was that Yi Wentao's strength is tyrannical, and it is very likely that he will personally fight. Who will Master choose to have the certainty of victory? Yi Wentao took a step forward and looked at Chu Luiyue with a smile, but the corners of his eyes were still cold. How brave. Originally, he was still a little hesitant, thinking that Chu Luiyue would very likely not agree. After all, this was too risky. But fortunately, she made this choice in the end. Since I am the one who initiated this, the person who will fight should naturally be me. Yi Wentao's words were followed by silence. They had already expected this. Then they heard Yi Wentao continue. Similarly, Shangguanyu, everyone is fighting over Peach Blossom Dock, so the person you choose should be your own person, and no outsiders should interfere. You don't have any objections to this, right? Everyone was stunned. Yi Wentao's subtext was that Chu Luiyue could not ask Zhao Song and the others for help, and could only choose one of her closest and most trusted people to fight. That narrowed her options by a lot. Yi Wentao's words were clearly to further suppress Chu Luiyue. This statement wasn't wrong, but it was somewhat opportunistic. Moreover, it was said by someone of Yi Wentao's status and strength, which was even more degrading and despicable. Zhao Song clicked his tongue and could not help but say, Brother Shangguan, we have been away from worldly affairs for a long time, so we don't know that the people out there are so shameless. Shangguanjing was also suppressing the anger in his heart, and he sneered. You are so righteous when it comes to seizing other people's territory. What else can't you do? Many of the family Yi's people looked terrible and their faces turned pale. They had always been high and noble, and even the first-class families were very polite and respectful when they saw them. When had they ever been humiliated like this? The point was, they could not refute it. However, compared to these people who were fidgeting, Yi Wentao's face was calm, and there was not the slightest ripple. It was as if he could not hear these words at all. He just stared at Chu Luiyue, waiting for her answer. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. He was indeed worthy of being the head of the family Yi for so many years. This kind of temperament was not something an ordinary person could have. She nodded. What the head of the family Yi said is not without reason. Everyone was even quieter. Some of the family Yi and the Nan family were secretly relieved. On the other hand, many of the people in Peach Blossom Dock were worried. This was a bad choice. Even if Chu Luiyue did not agree, Yi Wentao could not say anything. But why did she agree? Yi Wentao narrowed his eyes slightly. Then, have you chosen the person? Chu Luiyue raised the corner of her mouth and took a step forward. I've chosen. Peach Blossom Dock Shengguanyu, fight. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1959. Shengguanyu of Peach Blossom Dock, fight. Her clear voice spread far and wide, landing clearly in everyone's ears. After a brief moment of silence, the sound of people sucking in cold breaths could be heard incessantly. Is Chu Luiyue out of her mind? She's going to fight Yi Wentao in person? Isn't she courting death? Even though she was indeed more powerful than many exalted gods of the same level, she was still an exalted god. Yi Wentao was one of the best among the exalted gods. She had almost no chance of winning in a fight between the two of them. Yi Wentao was also stunned. For once he was slow to react. Are you sure? He scanned Chu Luiyue's body suspiciously. With her? Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows and chuckled. I don't regret my words. Why, family Yi, don't you think it's a good idea? Why would it be a bad idea? This is great. Yi Wentao had thought of this possibility, but he did not have much hope. He could tell that Chu Luiyue valued Peach Blossom Dock very much. If she had any sense left, she would not have chosen to fight in person. Besides Zhao Song and the others, she had other choices. Isn't Sun Yi an excellent choice? But in the end she chose to fight in person? Yi Wentao was shocked, but he could not help but have some doubts. Chu Luiyue is so bold. Does she have some other trump card? At that thought he could not help but look at Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu's expression was calm and nothing could be seen on his face. There seemed to be a faint smile on his lips. It seemed like he approved of Chu Luiyue's choice. However, there was more to it than that. Yi Wentao's mind raced. In the end he suppressed this thought. Even if Chu Luiyue had some tricks up her sleeve, they would be useless in the face of absolute power. As long as he defeated her quickly, this matter would be settled. There was no time to lose. Yi Wentao laughed. You have guts. I admire you. Next, please enlighten me, Your Highness. As he spoke, he paused for a moment and looked around him. Where would you like to start, Your Highness? He was asking about the area outside the barrier. Chu Luiyue laughed. My Peach Blossom Cove has just been tidied up with much difficulty, but it can't withstand any more torment. Still outside. After saying that, her figure moved and she actually flashed out of the enchantment. Everyone's eyes on her. Shock, curiosity, worry, confusion, Chu Luiyue's eyes. In the blink of an eye, she was thought. She's Anu uses his garden. Chu Luiyue smiled and didn't mind as she said loudly, it. There seemed to be a hint of a smile in her voice. Apart from Yi Wentao, the Nan family and family Yis were the people closest to her. Hearing Chu Luiyue's, they almost subconsciously stepped back. But when they started to move, they suddenly realized that they had unconsciously followed Chu Luiyue's instructions. She wasn't anyone to them. Why should they listen to her? For a moment, many people were embarrassed. But they've already retreated halfway, a little further. Chu Luiyue said. This stays. I'm fighting with family Yis. Swords have no eyes. It won't be good if I hurt you. Hers made everyone speechless. They had no choice but to step back again. In the end, with Chu Luiyue and Yi Wentao as the center, there was a large empty space in the middle. Behind Chu Luiyue stood Shengguanjing, Zhao Song and the others. Behind Yi Wentao, family Yi and the Nan family stood together, but there was still a distance between them. Is it okay now? Yi Wentao asked faintly. Chu Luiyue nodded. At this moment she was holding a shield in her left hand and a sword in her right hand. She already looked quite imposing. Yi Wentao's gaze swept across the armillary shield without batting an eyelid. Chu Luiyue's lips curled up slightly. Previously she had felt that something was wrong with Yi Wentao, as if he was trying his best to force her to make a move. Now it seemed that he was here for the armillary shield, please. Yuan Tao replied. After saying that, he slightly staggered his feet, and the aura on his body suddenly soared. At this point, Rong Xiu's figure moved and he flew out of the barrier. However, he didn't go forward. Instead, he went to stand beside Shang Guanjing and the others. He greeted Shang Guanjing, Nansu Huai, and the others in turn. Zhao Song couldn't help but say, "It's been a long time since we last met. You're even more brilliant than before. The princess consort is indeed extraordinary. It's just that, are you really not worried?" Rong Xiu chuckled and said calmly, "Peach Blossom Cove is Yuer's territory. Naturally, she can do whatever she wants. Since she made this choice, she must have her reasons. All he needed to do was to respect and support her decision." Zhao Song and the others looked at each other in surprise. They had long heard that Rong Xiu doted on this princess consort, but they didn't expect it to be to this extent. On one hand, he said that out of love and respect for Chu Luiyue. On the other hand, he probably had enough confidence in her. However, a high god against a high god, no matter how they thought about it, they wouldn't win. At first, they thought that Chu Luiyue would talk about some conditions, but she didn't. She just started like that. If she loses, with Rong Xiu, Shang Guanjing, and the others around, Yi Wentao definitely can't take her life. However, they definitely can't take action unless it's a crucial moment. Then won't Chu Luiyue still lose the entire Peach Blossom Cove? Rong Xiu knew what they were thinking, but he didn't explain. He placed his hands behind his back and looked forward. After all, Yi Wentao was a high god. At this moment he was prepared to go all out, and his aura became even stronger. Behind him, quite a few people whispered softly. "I really don't know why Shang Guanyu is so stubborn. She actually agreed to this and even accepted the challenge herself. Isn't it obvious who will win or lose? She's young, and it's inevitable that she's young and hot-blooded. She doesn't know who she is once she has some ability and fame. She'll cry in due time. How long do you think Master will take to take her down? 3 moves? It can't be that she won't admit defeat when she loses, right? How can that be? She's in front of so many people. Even if she can't bear to, she has to accept her loss. I think she'll regret it soon. It's a pity that there's no medicine for regret in this world." The group of people laughed softly. It was obvious that to them Yi Wentao would win for sure. The only problem was how long he would take to end this battle. Chu Luiyue looked calm as if she didn't care. Bang! A reddish gold fire suddenly surged out of Chu Luiyue's body. Digression, 6:30 p.m. While mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from AI Network. Chapter 1960. The loud and clear cry of a phoenix spread far and wide between heaven and earth. Immediately after, a small figure walked out of the flames. It was a little girl who looked no more than 3 or 4 years old. She was wearing a reddish gold lotus leaf dress and had 2 round buns on her head. She was barefooted and looked very cute. Especially that pair of big black grape-like eyes, which were blinking and looked very lively and cute. When she walked, the golden bell on her head would let out a crisp sound. Many people looked over. When they saw the little girl's appearance, they were first stunned and then suddenly came back to their senses. Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix? This is her contracted divine beast. No. This Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix is so young. Logically speaking, it shouldn't be able to transform into a human form. Didn't they say that this is the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan? There should be something different, right? Although the news of Chu Luiyue contracting dumpling had already spread throughout the entire Divine Ruins world, the number of people who had actually seen dumpling could be counted with one's fingers. Therefore, when dumpling appeared at this time, it immediately caused everyone to be shocked. Dumpling was already used to this kind of situation. She stood in front of Chu Luiyue with one hand on her waist and the other pointing at Yi Wentao. She frowned and asked angrily, "You old thing, you want to harm our Ayu?" She was still young, so even if she spoke, there was still a strong childish tone. To the crowd, not only did it not have any deterrence, but it also sounded a little funny. Some people couldn't help but laugh out loud. The Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix was an ancient divine beast, and the person in front of them was the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Her status was even more noble. But she was too young. What kind of combat power could such a small thing have? Against ordinary cultivators she might be a little deterrent, but against someone of Yi Wentao's level, it was really useless. Yi Wentao stared at Dumpling and his brows moved slightly. She could transform into a human form at such a young age. No wonder she was chosen as the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan before she broke the contract with Chu Luiyue. Her talent bloodline should be extremely strong. Unlike the others, Yi Wentao had always been cautious. Therefore, when he saw Dumpling, he didn't disregard her like the others. We only agreed to fight to decide the ownership of Peach Blossom Dock, Yi Wentao said lightly. Putting everything else aside, the other party's identity was not to be trifled with. He didn't want to summon Yi Zhao's group over. How long has it been? Someone actually came over to snatch it openly? You still have the nerve to say it? You're already so old, how shameless. Yi Wentao frowned. Even if he didn't care about these things, it was really embarrassing to be insulted by a little girl in front of so many people. It would be strange if he didn't get angry. Cut the crap, let's see who's the real deal. He looked at Chu Luiyue and his voice turned cold. There was no point in pestering endlessly like this. End the battle quickly and take down Peach Blossom Dock. All the problems would be solved easily. Chu Luiyue suddenly laughed. Family Yi, why are you in such a hurry? I'm not ready yet. Yi Wentao frowned. Ready? Wasn't it just a fight? What else was there to prepare? She already had the weapon in her hand and summoned the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix. What else did she want to do? Just as Yi Wentao was getting impatient, Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. Ziqin, I'll have to trouble you this time. There's more? Yi Wentao couldn't help but say. Shengguanyu, this is a one-on-one fight. You can't ask for outside help? Suddenly his voice stopped abruptly. The scene before him caused his eyes to be filled with astonishment. A tall and straight figure silently appeared beside Chu Luiyue. It was a young man in his 20s. He was very tall and wore a long black robe. His facial features were handsome and his expression was cold. He just stood there quietly and cold air continued to spread out from his body to the surroundings. His aura was very strong and oppressive. It was obvious that he was not weak. However, the most important thing was that there was a purple gold mark between his eyebrows. At first glance it looked like an eye. Yi Wentao's breathing suddenly stopped. That was an eye. Yi Wentao had dealt with the legendary Three-Eyed Eagle clan before. Therefore, when he first saw Ziqin, he keenly sensed that the aura on his body was very familiar. It was indeed the aura of the legendary Three-Eyed Eagle. Could it be, this young man was not a human but a legendary Three-Eyed Eagle? Yi Wentao rejected the idea as soon as it appeared in his mind. How could it be? Although the legendary Three-Eyed Eagle was a high-level divine beast, only the two primordial divine beast clans could transform into human form. For so many years, there had never been a legendary Three-Eyed Eagle that could transform into human form in the world of divine ruins. For a moment, Yi Wentao almost thought that this was just an illusion that the other party had used some sort of camouflage technique. However, he soon realized that was not the case. This was indeed the physical body of a human. Yi Wentao's heart was filled with shock. How could the others present not be the same? The crowd, which was still a little noisy, fell silent instantly. Chu Luiyue said with a smile, Yi Wentao is right. Patriarchy is right. Since the two of us have agreed to a one-on-one duel, of course we can't ask for outside help. However, Ziqin is not included in this list. Because, he is also my contracted divine beast. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1961. The fact that Chu Luiyue had two contracted divine beasts was not a secret in the Yuntian Tower. Many people had witnessed Rong Xiu summoning two divine beasts at the same time when he was choosing his concubine. One of them was the red-tailed phoenix and the other was the legendary Three-Eyed Eagle. Those who were observant would know if they asked around. Before Yi Wentao came, he had specially investigated Chu Luiyue. When he saw Ziqin, he was stunned for a moment before he immediately understood. There was no need to ask. This little girl had broken through from that red-tailed phoenix. And the black-clothed young man next to her was definitely the legendary Three-Eyed Eagle. He had actually transformed into a human form. This kind of thing was simply unheard of. It was not that Yi Wentao did not consider the fact that Chu Luiyue had contracted divine beasts to help her. However, even with the help of divine beasts, Chu Luiyue's strength would not be too strong due to the limitations of her own realm. At the very least, she could not be compared to him. The moment Chu Luiyue agreed to fight alone, Yi Wentao had already thought that he would win. Who knew that Chu Luiyue's two contracted divine beasts had actually transformed into human forms? The amount of information contained in this was too much. To be able to do this, on one hand, it proved that these two divine beasts were extremely talented and powerful. On the other hand, Yi Wentao was almost certain that they had definitely encountered some amazing opportunity. Perhaps Chu Luiyue still has some shocking trump card in her hands. Who knows? Zichen's appearance also caused the expressions of the surrounding people to change a few times. Everyone present had tyrannical strength. Even in the entire Divine Ruins world they were absolutely famous. However, even though they had seen countless things in the world, they were still stunned at this moment. It can't be right? This is the legendary three-eyed eagle that Shangguan Yu contracted? It transformed into a human form? Didn't they say that only the two ancient divine beasts could do this? What's going on now? I've read many ancient books, but I don't think there's anything like this. Wait, don't you think that Zichen's aura is a little strange? Other than the aura of the legendary three-eyed eagle, it seems, there's also a faint pressure? I feel it too, but I just can't remember. Just as everyone was discussing, Jun Jiuqing suddenly thought of something. He tilted his head slightly and looked at Miao Fushan. In an instant, something seemed to flash in his mind. It's the great phoenix dragon. He blurted out. As soon as these words were spoken, the group of people around them heard them clearly. The expressions of Yi Wenzhua and the others changed. The great phoenix dragon? How could? Someone subconsciously wanted to refute, but before he could finish his sentence he stopped abruptly. This was because Zichen's aura was very similar to Miao Fushan's. It was as if there was a string strung those pieces together. A hint of understanding flashed in Jun Jiuqing's eyes. Could this be the reason why Mao Zhen went to the Yuntian Tower? When Rong Xiu and Chu Luiwei got married, Mao Zhen, as the clan leader, personally went to congratulate them. Everyone was shocked and confused. They didn't know when the two of them had become friends with the great phoenix dragon. Jun Jiuqing had always been puzzled by this. Now that he saw Zichen, he finally understood. Zichen definitely had the bloodline power of the great phoenix dragon in his body. Sure enough, as soon as this thought flashed in his mind, Miao Fushan flew out of the barrier and came to Rong Xiu's side. He looked at Zichen, stroked his beard and said with a smile. Zichen, I haven't seen you for a while. Your strength has increased again. Zichen bowed respectfully. It's all thanks to Senior Mao Zhen. These two simple sentences caused the surrounding atmosphere to freeze for a moment. What did he mean? Not only was Zichen related to the great phoenix dragon, but he was also related to Mao Zhen. Then, Mao Zhe was the clan leader of the great phoenix dragon. If that was the case, didn't that mean they couldn't afford to offend Zichen? Family Yi is a god while I'm just a high god. There's a huge difference in our strength. If I don't make more preparations and go all out, I don't think I have a chance of winning. Chu Luiwei raised an eyebrow and said. Yi Wentao's face turned pale. Miao Fushan's words just now were clearly expressing his attitude. He wanted to support Zichen. It's no wonder Chu Luiwei and the rest somehow got involved with the great phoenix dragon clan. No wonder Miao Fushan would rather break the contract and stand on Chu Luiwei's side. Now Miao Fushan's attitude represented Mao Zhen's and the entire great phoenix dragon's attitude. He suppressed the anger in his heart and stared at the three figures in front of him. Chu Luiwei stood in the middle while Dumpling and Zichen stood on either side. On the surface, the aura and pressure of these three people were much inferior to the others. However, in reality the forces behind them caused Yi Wentao to have no choice but to be extremely cautious. On one side was the crimson gold heavenly phoenix, and on the other side was the great phoenix dragon. Yi Wentao had never thought that he would be besieged by two primordial divine beasts at the same time one day. Princess, you're really something. Yi Wentao sneered, his eyes cold. Ordinary people could only form a contract with one fiend beast, but Chu Luiwei had formed a contract with two fiend beasts at the same time. More importantly, one was a crimson gold heavenly phoenix, and the other was a godly three-eyed eagle that was inextricably linked to the great phoenix dragon clan. Who didn't know that the relationship between these two primordial divine beasts was very subtle? Now they were serving the same master. Yi Zhao and Mao Zhen didn't seem to care about this matter. What ability did Chu Luiwei rely on to do this? And the armillary sky shield in her hand, looking at the pair of dark and bright eyes that seemed to be smiling, Yi Wentao felt inexplicably uneasy. He faintly felt that he had underestimated Chu Luiwei. Swoosh. Chu Luiwei suddenly raised the crimson heaven sword in her hand. A short and sharp sound of something breaking through the air was heard. Master Family Yi, please? As soon as she finished speaking, Chu Luiwei jumped up with the tip of her foot. The surrounding heaven and earth energy began to rapidly gather toward the crimson heaven sword. Yi Wentao's face darkened. This Chu Luiwei is really gutsy. At this moment, not only was she not afraid, she even chose to take the initiative to attack. It seemed that she had a lot of confidence in herself. Relying on those two fiend beasts? Yi Wentao sneered in his heart. The appearance of Dumpling and Zichen had indeed made him a little more apprehensive. But that was all. One had to know that the strength of a contracted mythological beast was largely determined by the master of the contract. Chu Luiyue was just a high deity now. Even if she tried her best, what could she do? Yi Wentao's chi sank into his dantian. Great Azure Sun Axe. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1962. Yi Wentao was a god after all. The moment he raised his hand, the aura on his body began to surge crazily. Soon the aura around him greatly suppressed Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue's speed began to decrease at a speed visible to the naked eye. However, Dumpling's bloodline was noble and was not affected by the aura at all. She turned her head to look at Zichen, rubbed her nose and looked up at him. Let's compete today and see who can take care of him first. Zichen narrowed his eyes slightly. He was not interested in this kind of competition. However, when he saw Dumpling's enthusiasm, his lips moved slightly, and the words of rejection that were about to come out of his mouth suddenly stopped. Dumpling did not notice this and only took it as Zichen's agreement. Her body moved, and she transformed into a reddish-gold stream of light that went straight for Yi Wentao. See if I don't beat you to death today. Dumpling shouted loudly and arrived in front of Yi Wentao in the blink of an eye. She punched out. Her palms were white and chubby, and she clenched them into small fists like a ball of soft white cotton. From afar she did not seem to be a threat at all. Yi Wentao did not take Dumpling's attack seriously at first. However, the closer he got, the more he was surprised to find that the power contained in Dumpling's fist was far beyond his imagination. He frowned and then directly swung the sun great axe. The green light quickly gathered. The sharp and scorching aura immediately caused the surrounding air to become boiling hot. The energy surged and it kept closing in on Dumpling. A totem flashed between Dumpling's eyebrows. A dazzling purplish gold glow instantly erupted from her body. Boom. The power of both sides collided fiercely just like that. The violent energy vibrations instantly left a huge crater in the ground. Immediately after, Dumpling's figure flew backward. The terrifying impact swept over, and her body fell uncontrollably toward the ground. Dumpling's chest felt stuffy. She glanced around and found that she was about to fall to the ground. She immediately widened her eyes. This won't do. If she were to fall in front of so many people, it would be too embarrassing. She gritted her teeth and was about to save herself when she suddenly felt a gentle force lift her up. This force slowed down her speed and after stabilizing her, it quickly retreated. Dumpling turned around in a daze, only to see a black figure flashing past. Just now, was Zichen the one who attacked? Dumpling was stunned for a moment and blinked her eyes. Weren't they competing? Zichen was actually helping her? Looking at the tall figure in front of her, Dumpling bit her finger thoughtfully. He should be doing this for Master's sake? That's right. Relatively speaking, it was more important to deal with that annoying old man first. As for the competition, it was all incidental. Of course, Ayu was the main person in charge. Dumpling thought seriously. But, if she accepted his help for no reason, wouldn't she be at a disadvantage? Dumpling clenched her fists, and her eyes burned with excitement and fighting spirit. With a tap of her toes, she quickly rushed forward again. Flanking from the other side. She couldn't lose. Dumpling was sent flying. On the other side, Yi Wentao's situation was not much better. Under the impact of that shocking and violent force, he took half a step back, and the soles of his feet sank deeply into the ground. In this way he finally managed to stabilize his body. Although he had the upper hand compared to Dumpling, Yi Wentao was not happy at all. He was a god. And Dumpling? She was just a young crimson gold heavenly phoenix. He originally thought that this attack would directly kill Dumpling, or at least make her lose her ability to fight. But the result was the complete opposite. After Zichen caught Dumpling, Yi Wentao hurriedly took a look and was shocked to find that Dumpling did not seem to be injured. Such powerful physical strength had surpassed many adult crimson gold heavenly phoenixes. How could this be? Yi Wentao could not figure it out. He was puzzled and angry. But he did not have much time to think about this, because soon, Zichen caught up. Like Dumpling, he chose to attack head-on. A cold aura spread out from Zichen's body. He suddenly raised his hand and a cold black mist spread out from his palm. Yi Wentao was about to move, but he was shocked to find that a layer of frost had formed on his sun great axe. And at this time the cold air was still accumulating, causing the layer of ice to become thicker and thicker. Affected by the cold air, Yi Wentao was shocked to find that his force was gradually unable to infuse into the sun great axe. He waved the sun great axe in disbelief and wanted to use the force in his body to resist the cold air, but he found that the effect was minimal. Yuantao almost sucked in a cold breath. What the hell? It was just a legendary three-eyed eagle, how could it suppress the sun great axe? This was one of the 10 great sacred artifacts. What Yuantao did not know was that Zichen's physical body was forged from the bones and blood of a real great phoenix dragon, so it was already extremely strong. In addition, he had the support of Mao Zhen's strength. His strength far exceeded that of an ordinary legendary three-eyed eagle. To a certain extent he had borrowed Mao Zhen's pressure, so naturally he could suppress Yuantao. What frightened Yuantao even more was that the cold air was still spreading toward him. At this moment, a bright silver light flashed over. Chu Luiyue slashed down with his sword. The sharp blade slashed straight at Yuantao's face. Digression, I actually strained my right shoulder when I slept yesterday? I woke up at 5 in the morning because of the pain and I got up to apply plasters. I cried because of my own stupidity. I'll come back at 6 o'clock. Oh. Mobile user, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1963. In a moment of desperation, Yuantao made a prompt decision and threw out the sun great azure axe in his hand. At the same time he quickly retreated. The sharp edge of the sword brushed past the tip of his nose, narrowly missing him. Even though Yuantao's physical strength was extremely strong, Chu Luiyue's sword still caused him to feel a piercing pain. Almost half of his face was shaved off. Bang! The sun great azure axe went straight for Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue raised her hand and raised her sword. Clang! An extremely crisp sound of collision was heard. Chu Luiyue's hand went numb. The sun great azure axe changed direction and flew out. At this moment Yuantao suddenly stopped. With a thought, the sun great azure axe returned to his hand. It was ice cold to the touch. Yuantao's heart sank. The sun great azure axe's power had been completely sealed. He wanted to forcefully break it, but the layer of ice that covered it contained an extremely strong pressure. He couldn't completely remove it in a short period of time. In other words, Zichen had just made a move and directly removed one of his divine weapons. Yuantao was puzzled. At the same time he was gnashing his teeth in hatred. He really didn't know how Zichen had frozen the sun great azure axe when he didn't seem to have done anything. This battle had just begun, but he had already suffered heavy losses. The situation would only get worse later on. Chu Luiyue calmly rotated her sore wrist. The sun great azure axe was one of the 10 great divine weapons after all. It also contained Yuantao's power. The collision just now was truly very powerful. Fortunately, her divine body had reached large success. Moreover, Zichen had already helped to freeze most of the power on it. Otherwise, she might not have been able to take this attack head-on. Family head E, I see that your sun great azure axe doesn't seem to be very useful in your hands. Why don't you show it to me? Chu Luiyue revealed a smile and said very sincerely. Yuantao was so angry that his forehead was throbbing. How could he not tell that Chu Luiyue was coveting his sun great azure axe? She hadn't even won yet and she was already so arrogant. He snorted coldly. If you want to see, then come over with your own ability. After saying that, he held his breath and waved his hand. Then a ball of dark green light like a river rushed out of his palm. Those rays of light quickly spread out, becoming stars that floated in the air. Space, of course. Family head is actually using God's domain? A cry came from the family's crowd. The E of Chu Yi's families of the world continents of the world of Izs Chu E Ys. Wen Tao. As long as he made a move, it was very likely that he would be able to defeat her in 3 moves. Even when they saw Dumpling and Zichen appear, they still felt that Chu Luiyue was no match for Yuantao. With the help of Dumpling and Zichen, she could at most hold on for a little longer, but it still wouldn't affect the outcome. If 3 moves weren't enough, then 10? Because they were still some distance away from Chu Luiyue and Yuantao, they couldn't personally experience the immense pressure that Zichen exerted on Yuantao. Therefore, many people were shocked when they saw Yuantao summon his God's domain after his first attack failed. Was Chu Luiyue really so powerful that she could force Family Head to summon his God's domain? The green light spots drifted and soon completely enveloped the space in all directions. An indescribably heavy pressure suddenly descended upon them. Chu Luiyue instantly felt as if there was a mountain pressing down on her body, causing her to expend a lot of effort with every step she took. Even the origin power in her body became sluggish under the influence of this pressure. This god's domain was different from the pressure that Yi Wentao had exerted when he used the Sun Great Axe. In this space, almost everything was under Yi Wentao's control. Big Brother's god's domain is extremely powerful. Not to mention a supreme deity like Shangguanyu, even many supreme deities might not be able to break free from it. This time she shouldn't be able to do anything. Yi Wenzhuo was speaking, but before he could finish, he was interrupted by someone. What's that? Yi Wentao frowned and looked at it impatiently. He was stunned by what he saw. Chu Liwei stood there with her back straight and her eyes gently closed. Then a silver-red stream of light surged out of her body. In an instant it surged like a river. The dazzling light was like a sharp blade, cleanly slicing through the frozen space. That's her god's domain? Someone murmured in shock. Isn't she a supreme deity? How can this god's domain compete with masters? The silver-red god's domain continued to expand and soon surrounded Chu Liwei. When the last of the green light around her dissipated, she finally opened her eyes again. At this moment, Yi Wentao also looked up in shock and met Chu Liu's eyes. His heart suddenly skipped a beat. There was not the slightest bit of fear or cowardice in that pair of dark, calm and starry eyes. There was only a crazy desire to fight. Yi Wentao had fought with countless cultivators in his life, and there was no lack of geniuses and powerhouses among them. However, he had never seen such a gaze before. It was like a sudden burst of fire under the cold mountains. It had a powerful aura that could devour everything. It was as if everything in front of her was just a passing cloud or floating in the water. It was not worth mentioning at all. Yi Wentao did not know how to describe this feeling. He was clearly the one with a higher realm and should be the one looking down on everything. However, at this moment, facing Chu Liwei, who seemed to have an indomitable aura, he inexplicably felt a little. He could not describe his feelings at this moment. It was shock, astonishment, and confusion. There was also a trace of nervousness and worry that even he did not want to admit. This gaze was not something that Chu Liwei should have. Whoosh! The silver-red god's domain surged. Like waves crashing against the reef, rich energy kept surging and making sounds. Soon the two gods' domains were in a confrontation. In fact, from the outside, Chu Liu's god's domain only occupied a small space that surrounded her, Ziqin, and Dumpling. Yi Wentao's god's domain still occupied a larger area. It seemed that Yi Wentao had the upper hand. However, in reality, the area around Chu Liwei was forcefully taken from Yi Wentao by using her own god's domain. Even though Yi Wentao's god's domain was stronger, it was blocked outside and could no longer break through Chu Liu's god's domain. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1964. The force in Chu Liu's body was being consumed at a crazy rate. Her lips were slightly pale, which showed that it was not easy for her to reach this stage. Yi Wentao was indeed superior to her in terms of strength. This was undeniable. If she wanted to snatch a small piece of land under Yi Wentao's god realm, she would need to expend more energy than Yi Wentao. Fortunately, origin power was something she didn't lack the least. At this moment, Dumpling rushed forward again. This time, her fist was covered with a layer of reddish-gold flames. The scorching heat caused the surrounding air to become scorching hot. Yi Wentao clenched his teeth. Normally, a high god would not be able to withstand the pressure of his god realm. Sometimes, he did not even need to make a move and his opponents would have already fallen under his god realm. However, his opponents this time were really difficult to deal with. Tuanzi and Ziqin were existences that possessed the bloodlines of two ancient divine beasts. Moreover, their strengths weren't weak at all. The god realm could not suppress them at all. As for Chu Liwei, it was even more strange. In the entire divine ruins, there were very few people who could defeat him in the god realm. However, Chu Liwei did it. Yi Wentao was furious and humiliated. Since the beginning of the fight, the strength that Chu Liwei had displayed was a public slap to his face. Why was a high god so difficult to deal with? Seeing that Dumpling's fist was about to hit him, Yi Wentao felt the scorching heat. He felt the flames in his chest twitching as if they were about to explode. Finally, he bent his knees slightly and made a sudden move. His entire body was like an arrow that had left the bow as he charged toward Dumpling. He finally understood that if he wanted to get rid of Chu Liwei, he had to first cripple her two helpers. Due to his fear of the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix and the Great Void Phoenix Dragon, Yi Wentao did not intend to kill them. But, at the very least, they had to lose their ability to fight. Only then would he be free to deal with Chu Liwei. Without any fancy moves, Yi Wentao chose to throw a punch. 8 Directional Divine Fist. The power in his body surged towards his fist and collided with Dumpling's fist. Bang! A muffled sound was suddenly heard. One big and one small, one hard and one soft. No matter how he looked at it, the outcome was predestined. However, in the next moment, everyone was shocked to discover that Dumpling wasn't sent flying this time. She was suspended in midair, facing Yi Wentao's fist. A trace of blood gushed out from the corner of her mouth, but she didn't retreat even half a step. Immediately after, the crimson gold flame spread towards Yi Wentao at lightning speed. An intense burning pain came from his hand. Yi Wentao's face was distorted for a moment. But at the same time, he was shocked to discover that Dumpling's bloodline power was purer than he had expected. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to withstand his punch. She wasn't even an adult yet, but her physical strength was almost on par with his. If she was given more time, who knew how strong she would be? Thinking of this, Yi Wentao's eyes suddenly flashed with a cold glint. If he let them go today, they would definitely become a huge disaster in the future. Even if he didn't kill them, he had to get rid of them. He suddenly changed his fist into a palm and grabbed Dumpling's wrist without caring about the burning flame. Dumpling was shocked. Just as she was about to move, she suddenly felt a chill on her wrist. She had a bad feeling and immediately flung Yi Wentao's hand away. She felt a stinging pain. Dumpling immediately looked down and discovered that Yi Wentao had used a sharp object to cut open a wound on her wrist. Fortunately, she had dodged in time and the wound was very shallow. Under the burning of the flame, the bloodstain quickly dried up, leaving behind a dark red bloodstain. Dumpling frowned. She felt that something was wrong. Swoosh! Yi Wentao didn't stop. Instead, he rushed forward at an even faster speed. Dumpling immediately raised her hand to counterattack. But at this moment, she was shocked to discover that she was suddenly unable to gather the power in her body. Yi Wentao was almost within reach. Dumpling's heart suddenly felt like it was being clenched by something. Suddenly, a tall black figure flashed and appeared in front of Dumpling. Was Zichen. He waved his sleeve and several sharp icicles shot out. Yi Wentao was forced to stop. Taking advantage of this moment, Zichen turned around and glanced at Dumpling. Sensing his gaze, Dumpling also raised her head. Zichen was stunned. At this moment, Dumpling's face had a rare look of panic. He had almost never seen such an expression on her face. Zichen's heart skipped a beat. He immediately looked at the wound on her wrist. He quickly went forward and picked up Dumpling. What's wrong with Dumpling? Chu Luiyue also sensed that something was wrong and immediately went forward with a frown. Zichen's movements were extremely fast. He carried Dumpling over to Chu Luiyue's side. Chu Luiyue then saw that Dumpling's face was deathly pale. Actually, from the outside, Dumpling didn't seem to have any problems. But her appearance was clearly abnormal. Dumpling? Chu Luiyue's heart sank. He immediately reached out and touched her wrist. Immediately, his brows furrowed tightly. The energy in Dumpling's body seemed to have completely gone out of control. It began to wander and attack in all directions, unable to gather. However, the force of the attack wasn't very strong. It was like a fog drifting freely. At first glance, there didn't seem to be any problem. However, Chu Luiyue's heart surged with immense anger. This was clearly Yi Wentao deliberately channeling his energy into Dumpling's body and forcefully disrupting the circulation of energy in her body. She suddenly raised her head and glared at Yi Wentao. Yi Wentao, you're despicable. How could you use such a despicable method? Yi Wentao wasn't surprised that Chu Luiyue could see through it. He smiled faintly, but his eyes were extremely cold. I just wanted to let her rest for a while. How is that despicable? Don't forget that we're in a battle. The winner has to be determined. Who can you blame for not protecting your contracted mythological beast well? You. Chu Luiyue was about to step forward when he was suddenly stopped by Dumpling. Are you? Chu Luiyue turned around. Her brows were full of worry. Dumpling, don't worry. This matter isn't over today. Dumpling shook her head. I'm fine. You don't worry. I'll be fine soon. Dumpling had always been lively. Chu Luiyue rarely saw her so weak. For a moment she felt unbearably angry. However, she still gently patted Dumpling's head. Okay. Dumpling, wait for me here. I'll be back soon. After that, she glanced at Zichen. Zichen, you stay here and protect Dumpling. Zichen guessed what she wanted to do. He said hesitantly. She was probably no match for Yi Wentao alone. Chu Luiyue had already turned her head and looked at Yi Wentao. Clang. She suddenly smashed the armillary shield in her hand to the ground. Digression. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1965. Yuantao's eyes lit up. Is she finally going to use it? However, Chu Liyue's next move disappointed him greatly. She let go of the armillary sky shield as if she had no intention of using it. Then Chu Liyue stabbed the red cloud sword into the ground. A crack spread on the ground. Yuantao was even more confused. Is Chu Liyue not going to continue the fight? But judging from her expression, it was clearly not. Whoosh! A red stream of light suddenly flew out. A red scroll floated quietly in front of Chu Liyue. Nan Hetian's eyes widened almost immediately. Flowing cloud flying diagram. As soon as he finished speaking, the faces of the Nan clan members became extremely ugly. At first they were not sure, but Nan Hetian followed Nan Yifan all the time and was most familiar with this. Since he had said so, it must be the flowing cloud flying diagram. Not only did Shangguan Yu capture Luo Yan and the others, but she also took the flowing cloud flying diagram. Someone could not help but exclaim in shock. But thinking about it carefully, this was actually not that surprising. This thing had always been under Nan Yifan's care. This time, when Nan Yuxing and the others came to the Peach Blossom dock, Nan Yifan secretly handed the flowing cloud flying diagram to them out of worry. But now Nan Yuxing was dead, and the remaining elders were either dead or betrayed the Nan family. It was not surprising that the flowing cloud flying diagram ended up in Chu Liyue's hands. However, this thing was after all the Nan family's most precious treasure. Now that it was taken away by Chu Liyue, the Nan family members naturally did not feel good. Nan Hetian took a deep breath and tried to calm himself down. Don't worry, it belongs to the family head. She can't use it. Whoosh! Chu Liyue waved her hand gently, and the flowing cloud flying diagram instantly spread out. Nan Hetian choked and the rest of his words were stuck in his throat. His eyes were full of shock. The remaining Nan family members did not have any better reactions. Looking at her, could it be that she had really taken the flowing cloud flying diagram for herself? However, Nan Yifan was still breathing. The moment Yi Wentao saw the flowing cloud flying diagram, a rare look of surprise flashed across his face. He and Nan Yifan could be considered old acquaintances, so he was very clear about how much Nan Yifan valued this treasure. If he wasn't worried about Nan Yuxing, he probably wouldn't have taken it out. Who would have thought that in the end Chu Liyue would benefit? But most importantly, Chu Liyue seemed to know how to use the power of this thing. Just as this thought flashed through his mind, Yi Wentao saw Chu Liyue reach out his hand. Her fingers were slender and fair like the finest jade. Then she tapped lightly on the flowing cloud flying diagram. Her actions were done casually, with an air of nonchalance and nobility. It was as if he did not care about what was happening in front of him. In the next moment, a stream of light flew out and quickly formed a huge Shen formation in midair. 4 symbols formation. Although Yi Wentao wasn't a Shen master, he was quite knowledgeable about Shen formations, so he immediately recognized this Shen formation the moment he saw it. The scene in front of him caused his pupils to shrink slightly. Just now, Chu Liyue just lightly touched it, and she managed to form this Shen formation? No. This Shen formation came from the flowing cloud flying diagram. Even a true Grandmaster Shen master wouldn't be able to successfully activate the 4 symbols formation in such a short period of time. The only explanation was that this was engraved on the flowing cloud flying diagram. She only needed to inject a little force to activate it. Everyone in the Nan family was also stunned. There's a Shen formation in the flowing cloud flying diagram. For thousands of years, the flowing cloud flying diagram had been placed in the Nan family, and it was inherited and safeguarded by the successive patriarchs. Because the Nan family rarely interacted with other aristocratic families, and Nan Yifan himself was extremely powerful, the number of times he used the flowing cloud flying diagram could be counted on one hand. In many people's minds, the flowing cloud flying diagram was used to save lives, and it was only responsible for quickly bringing people away at a critical moment. This included many members of the Nan family. At this moment, watching Chu Liyue summon an extremely high-level Shen formation from the flowing cloud flying diagram, the Nan family was stunned. Immediately after, without waiting for them to react, they saw Chu Liyue's jade-like fingers land a few dots on the flowing cloud flying diagram in succession. One Shen formation after another appeared in succession. Furthermore, the lowest level was actually at the Grandmaster level. These Shen formations quietly suspended in midair, and very quickly, they formed a unique Shen formation barrier in front of Chu Liyue. What was even more terrifying was that the number of Shen formations was still increasing. All kinds of Shen formations surged out one after another, and a powerful aura spread out from above. Yi Wentao's God realm started to faintly tremble. Sensing this, Yi Wentao's heart uncontrollably surged with a trace of uneasiness. One had to know that a Grandmaster Shen master was able to fight with a venerable god expert. And now, just based on the dozens of Shen formations in front of him, about half of them were at this level. This was almost equivalent to several great grandmasters fighting against him. He subconsciously turned his head and glanced at Nan Yifan. At this moment, Nan Yifan was in a half-alive, half-dead state, and was completely unaware of all this. Yi Wentao was both shocked and furious. He looked at Chu Luiyue again as if he was looking at a monster. At this moment he finally confirmed one thing. Nan Yifan was not the true owner of the flowing cloud flying diagram at all. Otherwise, it was impossible for Nan Yifan to not react at all when Chu Luiyue caused such a huge commotion. Furthermore, it was possible that even Nan Yifan did not know that the true flowing cloud flying diagram was actually like this. If he had known and told Nan Yuxing, he would not have fallen to his current state. In other words, the flowing cloud flying diagram that the Nan family had treasured and preserved for thousands of years had never truly belonged to them. Instead, it had become Chu Luiyue's object by chance. Chu Luiyue's eyes were burning as she stared intently at Yi Wentao, who was standing in front of her. Then she suddenly activated the power in her body and shouted, "Go!" As her voice fell, the dozens of Shen formations slowly and firmly surrounded Yi Wentao. Violent energy wreaked havoc, and wherever it passed, the Green God realm collapsed inch by inch. Digression. I hope that everyone will be reunited and safe during the Lantern Festival. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1966. The God domain, which was originally extremely sturdy and oppressive, started to crumble uncontrollably. In just a short while, those Shen formations were like a dazzling giant net, closing in on Yi Wentao. Yi Wentao's expression changed drastically. Even if he was a top-notch supreme god expert, it was impossible for him to deal with the siege of so many Shen formations at the same time. He quickly circulated the force in his body, and the totem on his forehead flashed. A figure that was almost identical to him appeared in front of him. Then the figure started to expand rapidly. In the blink of an eye, it had grown to the height of Yi Wentao and the other two. The eyes of the god body had a deep, dark blue color. Cold and disdainful. Divine body of 8 directions. Nan Suhui murmured as he stared at the divine body. Yi Wentao's divine body was extremely rare, and its combat power was extremely strong. It was rumored that the divine body of 8 directions was created by the family Yi's ancestors, and only members of the family Yi could cultivate it. However, because it was extremely difficult to cultivate, there were not many who could actually succeed. Most members of the family Yi would choose to cultivate other divine bodies after they failed. And once it was successful, the strength of the cultivator would greatly increase. This was also why Yi Wentao was able to sit firmly in the position of family Yi for so many years, and he had absolute authority in the family. Nan Suhui had only heard of it before, but he had never seen it with his own eyes. He did not expect to see Yi Wentao summoning the divine body of 8 directions at this moment. Then, under everyone's gaze, the divine body took a step forward, raised its hand and punched out. The energy of heaven and earth in the surroundings surged madly and gathered into a huge gust of wind from the fist. Yi Wentao's mind moved, and the gust of wind from the fist swept out. Boom! A loud sound was heard. The divine body of 8 directions smashed the Shen formation at the front with its fist. That Shen formation instantly shattered into countless pieces, shining faintly and scattering in all directions. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly, and his finger quickly slid across the flowing clouds flying diagram. Those streams of light seemed to have sensed something and surged over. Like raindrops falling into the sea, they were quickly annihilated. Chu Luiyue lowered her gaze to take a look. The small square where the profound formation was located originally had a brilliant color, but at this moment, it had already dimmed quite a bit. It could be seen that Yi Wentao's attack had a huge impact on the profound formation. Fortunately, after this destroyed profound formation returned, although it was greatly damaged, it continued to absorb the surrounding energy of heaven and earth, using it to replenish its own strength. Seeing the color slowly returning, Chu Luiyue let out a long sigh of relief. The Shen formation on the flowing cloud flying diagram could be summoned multiple times. Even if it was destroyed by force, as long as there was enough heaven and earth energy to replenish it, there would still be a day when it could be restored. However, it might take a little longer. Yi Wentao destroyed a profound formation with a single punch, causing everyone's expression to change. As expected of the divine body of 8 directions. It really lives up to its reputation. Nan Suhui looked at Chu Luiyue with a slightly worried expression. Although she had the flowing cloud flying diagram in her hand, her realm was still far from Yi Wentao's. There was a huge gap between the two of them and it wasn't that easy to cross it. Yi Wentao wasn't that easy to deal with. Shang Guanjing and the rest were also watching the situation on the stage closely. Zhao Song couldn't help but say, "Brother Shangguan, Yi Wentao's divine body of 8 directions is a top-notch divine body in the world. It's said that the last time he publicly summoned the divine body of 8 directions was a few decades ago. It's really amazing that your little girl could force him to this extent in such a short period of time. But then again, now that he's going all out, I'm afraid your little girl will be in danger." Yi Wentao was a ruthless character. Since he dared to come this time, he must have great confidence. After not seeing him for so many years, his divine body of 8 directions had become even stronger. The Peach Blossom Dock was such a good place. If he really had to give it up because of this loss, even he couldn't help but feel that it was a pity. Shang Guanjing placed his hands behind his back and squinted his eyes slightly. "Yi Wentao is indeed powerful, but isn't someone to be trifled with either." His tone was calm, but it was filled with great confidence. It was as though he was certain that Chu Luiyue would win this round. Zhao Song turned around and exchanged glances with the rest behind him. They could see that Chu Luiyue was indeed very powerful, but compared to Yi Wentao she was still lacking, right? This divine body of 8 directions, boom. Another violent shattering sound was heard. The second Xian formation was forcefully destroyed by Yi Wentao's divine body of 8 directions. The atmosphere among the crowd seemed to have become even more tense. The Xian formations were shattered one after another, but Chu Luiyue remained standing on the same spot, as though she didn't have any reaction. She looked ahead quietly, and her beautiful face was filled with calmness. Waves seemed to be surging in that pair of deep black eyes, as though she was thinking about something. Seeing that Yi Wentao was like a hot knife through butter, many people started to get anxious. What exactly was Chu Luiyue planning to do? She couldn't possibly be prepared to admit defeat just like that, right? Yi Wentao looked on coldly, and a mocking smile flashed across his face. The flowing cloud flying diagram was indeed powerful. Chu Luiyue was able to take it for herself and comprehend the mystery within it. It was her ability. With this item, cultivators only needed to expend a bit of energy to trigger the Xian formation, and they would be able to unleash several times the power. It was truly a rare treasure. However, many people had neglected one thing. Even if each Xian formation only required a bit of energy to activate, these dozens of Xian formations were not a small number when put together. Chu Luiyue couldn't possibly hold on forever. Hence, as long as these Xian formations were dealt with, Chu Luiyue would be completely unable to continue the battle. Yi Wentao thought about this and began to channel his energy even more crazily. Boom boom boom. All sorts of explosive sounds could be heard. It was almost deafening. The violent energy spread in all directions. Many people hurriedly set up barriers in front of them, and with great difficulty, they managed to block the energy outside. Even so, there were still a few weaker people who couldn't withstand the pressure and spat out blood as they retreated. The Peach Blossom Cove's barrier shook again. "Ayu," Dumpling widened her eyes and wanted to go forward. Zichen frowned slightly, caught her outstretched hand and stuffed it back. Dumpling was a small and soft person. She was easily held in Zichen's arms and she couldn't break free. "If you go over now, you'll only cause trouble for her," Zichen said lightly. Dumpling heard this and finally gave up struggling. She clenched her fists tightly and stared straight ahead. She couldn't cause trouble. She had to help Ayu. Swoosh. A reddish gold flame suddenly appeared in her eyes. Almost at the same time, the sky quickly darkened. Zichen was shocked and looked up immediately. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1967. This sudden commotion caused everyone present to be shocked, and they all raised their heads to look. What's going on? Is someone about to break through? Or, is it because those two are fighting? It doesn't seem like it. Everyone was talking about it and they were all confused. Yi Wentao and Chu Luiyue had been fighting for a while. If this commotion was really caused by the two of them, it should have come a long time ago. It shouldn't have come now, right? Then, the rich energy of heaven and earth quickly formed a huge vortex and rushed down. When they saw the direction of the vortex, many people sucked in a breath of cold air. It seemed to be going for the crimson gold heavenly phoenix. Zichen quickly realized something and glanced at Dumpling in his arms. Dumpling looked up, and the dim light of the sky was reflected in her grape-like eyes. Zichen put Dumpling down and took a few steps back, but his eyes were still fixed on Dumpling. The moment he stepped back, the energy in the sky quickly descended and rushed into Dumpling's body. Her body was like a bottomless pit, crazily devouring all the energy around her. Chu Liwei looked back at Dumpling, and a trace of surprise flashed in her eyes. She was swoosh. A crimson gold feather suddenly broke through the air. Chu Liwei's heart skipped a beat. She guessed right. Dumpling was preparing to open her fifth meridian? But how long had it been since she last opened her meridian? In such a short time, Dumpling was going to. Suddenly, a light flashed in her mind. Dumpling was converting the energy that Yi Wentao forced into her body into her own. That was the true power of a god. In fact, after Chu Liwei passed the god-destroying tribulation, she noticed that Dumpling and Zichen's strength had increased a lot. This time, with the help of Yi Wentao's power, it was reasonable for Dumpling to want to break through. However, other than Chu Liwei, everyone present had never personally witnessed the crimson gold celestial phoenix meridian opening. Therefore, when the golden feather appeared, many people were stunned. It wasn't until the feather floated in front of Dumpling that someone finally came to a realization. That's the feather of the crimson gold heavenly phoenix. As soon as he finished speaking, many people finally regained their senses. Those were indeed the feathers of a scarlet gold heavenly phoenix. It was entirely scarlet gold, flickering with radiance. But why did this thing suddenly appear? Just as everyone was at a loss, the feather began to gently move in the air. At the same time, Dumpling closed her eyes and the flames around her body surged wildly. Her aura began to rise crazily. Miao Fushan was the first to recover from his shock. Is she going to open her meridians? The two ancient divine beast clans had always been in a subtle relationship of opposition and competition. Sometimes they knew each other better than they knew each other. In addition, Miao Fushan's seniority was extremely high. He had personally witnessed the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan opening their meridians. Therefore, when he saw this scene, he immediately recognized it. His words were like a stone that fell into the lake, splashing countless waves in an instant. Everyone was in an uproar. Opening her meridians. Although this term was not common to them, it didn't mean that they didn't understand what it meant. Those present were all people with status and strength, so they basically understood what it meant. How old is that crimson gold heavenly phoenix? She's already opening her meridians? Since she has already transformed into a human form, it means that she has already opened her meridians. But the point is, why is it starting now? How many meridians has she opened? No, if she's opening her meridians, then, as the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, Yi Zhao and the rest should have noticed it, right? I clearly saw that she was on the verge of dying. Why is she suddenly opening her meridians now? This contracted divine beast of Shangguanyu is as unpredictable as her. Everyone was discussing animatedly. Yi Wentao also noticed the situation here and immediately frowned. Soon, he figured out the crux of the matter and couldn't help but secretly grit his teeth. This crimson gold heavenly phoenix was really cunning. Not only was it not defeated by his power, but it also transformed into its own power and even opened her meridians directly. Yi Wentao took a deep breath and calmed himself down. Even if it's opening her meridians, it's not a big deal. How old is this phoenix? Even if it's opening her meridians, it should only be opening the second meridians, the third meridians at most. Even if it's successful, it can't make any waves. Just as this thought appeared in his mind, he saw several golden rays appear in front of Dumpling in succession. 1, 2, 3, 4. The crimson gold feather drew the fifth meridians. Yi Wentao's brain seemed to have been hit by something and was completely stunned. The fifth meridians? Isn't this opening her fifth meridians? She's crazy. In the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, there aren't many who have opened their fifth meridians. What's more, this is an underage. His heart started to beat rapidly. I have to stop her. Otherwise today's battle would have been really dangerous. He did as he thought. At this time, Yi Wentao had already solved the several barriers in front of him. After seeing Dumpling's movements, his mind moved, and the 8 directions godly body rushed forward without hesitation. Boom. The huge and muscular figure walked forward, leaving deep footprints on the ground as it shook. At this moment, Chu Liyue's body suddenly shone brightly. A gorgeous light soft armor instantly covered her entire body. A terrifying aura suddenly descended upon them. Many people were shocked. Godly body? Digression. Mobile users who come at 6 p.m. please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1969. Yi Wentao did not understand what Chu Luiyue meant at first. That was until he realized that the power of the profound formations was still rising. His eyes shrunk, and he then realized that Chu Luiyue was burning her own force to forcefully support these Shen formations. Not only did her origin power not burn out like he had expected, it was even abundant to the point that she was able to divert a considerable amount of energy to control these profound formations when she was fighting with his omnidirectional divine body. Countless terrifying energies came from the profound formations and began to strangle Yi Wentao. Without the protection of the omnidirectional divine body, Yi Wentao's physical strength was very limited. Even though he was a god, he did not have a divine body and could not fight against these profound formations bare-chested. There were many Grandmaster-level profound formations inside. The last remaining divine domain around Yi Wentao began to collapse. A heavy pressure fell on his body, heavy and painful. Intense pain came from every part of his body. Yi Wentao was so shocked that he could not speak. Chu Luiyue was definitely only a high god. They had fought before, so he was very sure of this. But how did she store such an astonishing amount of origin power in her body? Even he faintly felt that he was indeed slightly inferior at this moment. Yi Wentao was not the only one who had the same question. In fact, when Chu Luiyue took action again and controlled the profound formations, almost everyone present was stunned. A cultivator's body was like a container. Every level of cultivator had a certain upper limit. Once this upper limit was exceeded, the cultivator could very well explode and die. This was the invisible barrier created by the level of strength. Normally, the origin power stored in a high god expert's body was definitely not comparable to a high god expert's. Sometimes, the difference between the two could be several times or even 10 times. But now, everyone could see that Chu Luiyue had crushed Yi Wentao in this aspect. An endless stream of energy gushed out from her body, as if it would never be exhausted. The smug smile on Yi Wentau's face suddenly froze. How is this possible? She has accumulated so much origin power in her body, but she didn't explode and die? If it were anyone else, their pill of essence and physical body would not be able to withstand it. Over at the Nan family and family Yi's side, the originally boisterous and lively atmosphere instantly froze. Yi Wentao was thinking crazily. Countless thoughts flashed through his mind. He couldn't just sit there and wait for death. He was clearly aware of the consequences of being surrounded and annihilated by these profound formations if he continued to stay here. He had to avoid these troubles first. Thinking of this, Yi Wentao suddenly raised his head. With a thought, he tried to recall his omnidirectional divine body. However, at this moment, Chu Luiyue suddenly opened his palms and grabbed the divine body's wrists with both hands. Yi Wentao's heart sank. "Shangguan Yu? How dare you?" Chu Luiyue did not seem to hear him at all. The origin power around her surged wildly and poured into both of her palms. Then, she abruptly raised her qi and forcefully dragged the divine body into the air. Her slender and flexible waist spun. The huge divine body of 8 directions, which was several times bigger than her, was then violently flung away by Chu Luiyue. At this moment, Yi Wentao was distracted and let Chu Luiyue succeed in flinging the divine body of 8 directions far away. Thump, thump, thump. Heavy and hurried footsteps could be heard. The divine body of 8 directions left a few deep footprints on the ground before it could stabilize itself. However, at this moment, Chu Luiyue was standing between Yi Wentao's physical body and his divine body. Yi Wentao gritted his teeth in hatred. Chu Luiyue was clearly doing this on purpose. Yi Wentao's anger reached its peak. The last string in his brain was stretched taut. A totem quickly appeared between his eyebrows. Then he moved his body, intending to force his way out. At this moment, a black figure suddenly appeared behind Yi Wentao. Was Zichen. He looked at Yi Wentao with a cold and disdainful gaze, as if he was looking at an ant. Yi Wentao felt a chill at the back of his head and subconsciously turned around to look. The huge net formed by the Shen formations had surrounded almost 3/4 of the space around him, leaving only a small space behind him. However, he did not expect Zichen to appear here. Yi Wentao's intuition told him that something was wrong. Subsequently, a vast and distant howl resounded from Zichen's body. It seemed to be the cry of a legendary 3-eyed eagle, but also the cry of a dragon. Then a purple gold flowing light flew out from between his eyebrows. The sound of a sharp weapon piercing through flesh could be heard for a short while. Yi Wentao did not dodge in time, and one of his shoulders was sliced off. Blood dripped. Yi Wentao spat out a mouthful of blood, shocked and furious. "You, Qi." At this moment, another clear cry of a phoenix soared into the sky. On the other side, Ancestor Golden Feather had finally completed the fifth strand. Fifth meridian, open. Dumpling's aura surged. Her body was still burning with golden flames, and she looked like a ball of fire as she charged toward Yi Wentao. Leave your remaining arm to me. Chu Liuyue's figure moved, and she harshly kicked the all-directional divine body. The omnidirectional divine body immediately crossed its arms and blocked in front of it. Crack. The crisp sound of bones breaking could be heard. Then, everyone saw that the omnidirectional divine body's arms were bent at an extremely strange angle. The one who lost was Yi Wentao's omnidirectional divine body. Digression. Mobile users at 7 p.m., please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1970. As the two exchanged blows, Chu Liuyue's divine body actually cracked Yi Wentao's omnidirectional divine body? The scene in front of them was so shocking that the expressions of the Nan family and Family E became unusually interesting. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, they would never have believed that the divine body of a high god could defeat the divine body of an honorable god. Even if they told others about this, they would be treated as a joke. On the other side, Sheng Wanjing and the others were also deeply shocked. Although Rong Xiu had already explained that Chu Liuyue's divine body was tempered by the god-destroying tribulation, they had only heard of it and had never seen it with their own eyes. Otherwise, no one would have recognized Chu Liuyue when he summoned his divine body. The god-destroying tribulation could only be summoned by an extremely small number of honorable gods. Those who could successfully pass it were even rarer. They did not even think about it in the beginning. If not for Rong Xiu's reminder, they would still be confused. The power of Chu Liuyue's divine body had also shocked them. This could no longer be described as simply powerful. This was clearly heaven-defying. SSS. Brother Shengwan, this junior of yours is really... Zhao Song was conflicted for a while and could not think of any words to express his feelings at this moment. In the end, he could only smile helplessly and shake his head. His eyes were filled with undisguised admiration and envy. You're really lucky. This kind of fortune was really something that others could only envy. In the Divine Ruins world, there were countless aristocratic families and clans. Every family would spend countless resources and effort to nurture the younger generation. What was the reason? Wasn't it so that the glory of the family could be passed down from generation to generation? Only when the descendants were outstanding enough would they have enough glory on their faces and the family be able to continue on. However, Chu Liuyue alone had done so much. Indeed, she was born outside the Divine Ruins world. Compared to the disciples of the aristocratic families, her starting point was much lower. However, it could not stop her from being extremely talented and destined by the heavens. Which one of the people present today was not an extremely outstanding genius when they were young? However, compared to Chu Liuyue, they were greatly inferior. Even someone like Zhao Song sighed at his own inferiority. Sheng Wanjing did not say anything. His eyes were fixed on Chu Liuyue, who was in the arena, and his eyes were glistening. Sheng Wanjing's descendant was naturally the most outstanding. Zhao Song looked at Rong Xiu and sighed with emotion. The saint's eyes. Rong Xiu's lips curved up slightly, and he happily agreed with the compliment. He had always been like that. Chu Liuyue took advantage of the situation and continued forward. This time she didn't use any divine artifacts. She just directly went up to fight. Every punch hit the flesh. The divine body and the god was passively. The god was gods as a passive as a. A series of dull thuds and the sound of bones breaking alternated. Everyone felt their scalps go numb. However, Chu Liuyue's expression did not change at all from the beginning to the end. Even her eyes were filled with fighting spirit. She did not say a word. She only cared about attacking and beating up the divine body of 8 directions. On the other side, Dumpling quickly passed through those Xian formations and came to Zichen's side. She looked at Yi Wentao with a burning gaze. She licked her lips and crossed her small hands, making cracking sounds. Zichen wanted to continue, but he stopped when he heard her voice. Seeing Dumpling's eager look, Zichen raised his eyebrows slightly. Can you do it? After all, she was injured just now. Zichen meant well, but in Dumpling's ears it was not the case. She rubbed her nose. Who are you looking down on? I'll cut off one of his arms right now for you to see. Yi Wentao almost choked when he heard that. That was a great humiliation to him. Since when did he, the dignified head of Family E, become an object for them to bet on? And they were betting on his arm. At that thought, Yi Wentao looked at his bleeding wound and gnashed his teeth in hatred. However, at that moment, Dumpling had already moved. She raised her hand and a crimson gold flame suddenly rose from her palm. Then, with a wave of her small hand, the flame instantly transformed into a long whip and lashed wildly at Yi Wentao. Wherever the flame passed, the void collapsed one after another. Yi Wentao was shocked. A crimson gold sky phoenix who had opened the fifth meridian had grown so much in strength. In fact, although he had interacted with the crimson gold sky phoenix clan before, he did not know much about them, nor had he fought with a crimson gold sky phoenix who had opened the fifth meridian. Generally speaking, people of this level could be elders in the clan. Yi Wentao would not find trouble for no reason and offend an elder of the crimson gold sky phoenix clan for no reason. It was also because of this that Dumpling's attack was far beyond Yi Wentao's expectations. The flame came rapidly, causing the surrounding temperature to rise rapidly and become boiling hot. The sticky and sweet blood stains on Yi Wentao's body quickly dried up because of this, leaving only dark red and stiff traces of blood. The flame whip tore through the air. Yi Wentao originally wanted to forcibly take this move, but Zichen's previous attack had caused great damage to him, forcing him to choose to retreat now. However, he was fast, but Dumpling's flame was faster. The flame flashed in front of him, and Yi Wentao suddenly felt a surge of uneasiness. Then, a heart-wrenching burning pain came from his other arm. It was the flame whip that was tightly wrapped around his remaining arm. Dumpling did not hesitate and pulled fiercely. The sound of blood and bone tearing could be heard. Yi Wentao did not have time to think of a way to defend himself before Dumpling tore off his arm. Now, only 2 bloody wounds were left on his shoulders. It was a ghastly sight. The thick smell of blood permeated the air, and it was almost nauseating. Dumpling waved her hand disdainfully, and then raised her head proudly. "How is it?" As Zichen watched, the corners of his lips suddenly curled up. Dumpling was stunned. What was he smiling about? At this moment, Chu Liwe finally stopped. The 8 directions divine bodies had been beaten to a pulp by her and could not retaliate at all. She turned around and raised her eyebrows. "Very good. Leave his life to me." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1971. As soon as she finished speaking, Chu Liu's figure disappeared from where she was standing. Yi Wentao instinctively turned around when he heard the sound. He saw a flash of light and shadow in front of him. Then the void started to vibrate and ripple. A suffocating pressure came over him. The blood in his body seemed to freeze at this moment. Then, a hand suddenly broke through the void and came toward him. It was a slender and fair hand. It was covered with a layer of beautiful soft armor that glowed faintly. At first glance it looked like a pearl or jade. Yi Wentao was stunned for a moment. Then he was shocked. This was Chu Liu's hand. Sure enough, in the next moment, Chu Liu's figure also rushed out from behind the void. Yi Wentao immediately retreated without hesitation. However, Zichen and Dumpling were standing behind him. Where could he run to? Zichen waved his sleeve and sent out a blast of energy. It formed a translucent boundary and blocked Yi Wentao's escape route. Yi Wentao sensed the cold aura coming from behind him. He did not need to turn around to know what was going on. At this moment he was in a dilemma. Large beads of sweat appeared on Yi Wentao's forehead. Almost instantly his back was drenched in cold sweat. His face was pale and his lips were trembling. Before this, Yi Wentao would never have thought that he would be forced into such a corner by Chu Liue. In fact, he did not underestimate Chu Liue at all. All the things that had happened to her during this period of time had proven that she was definitely more difficult to deal with than the average great deity. Therefore, Yi Wentao did not care about his reputation and used his status as a great deity to half-coerce Chu Liue into fighting with him. He thought that this would be a sure win for him. Who would have thought that? Bang! Chu Liue punched Yi Wentao in the chest. Yi Wentao's body flew out in an instant and landed heavily on the ground. Whoosh, boom. His body left a long trail of blood on the ground as he crashed into the barrier set up by Zichen. Yi Wentao's body shook and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His aura instantly weakened. Patriarch. When the family E members saw this, they could not help but exclaim in shock. Everything happened too quickly. Zichen and Dumpling attacked one after another, followed by Chu Liue. Everyone only felt that the scene in front of them was a mess. When they looked again, they saw that Yi Wentao had already fallen to such a state. Without his arms, his omnidirectional divine body had also been severely injured. All of this was fatal to Yi Wentao. He lay on the ground on the verge of death. He kept spitting out blood and he looked battered and exhausted. Chu Liue walked up to him. When Yi Wentao heard the commotion, he struggled to get up. But now, such a simple action was already extremely difficult for him. Chu Liwei walked to him and stood still as she looked down at him. Family Yi, it looks like you're not as powerful as I thought you were? This sentence was like a slap to Yi Wentao's face. Yi Wentao raised his head with difficulty. His eyes were filled with hatred. Yo. Chu Liwei looked up at Family Yi and the Nan family members with a half-smile. You brought so many people to openly steal my peach blossom dock. I thought Patriarch Family Yi was extremely powerful. I didn't expect, or did I overestimate you? Everyone was extremely aggrieved. Their faces turned pale. Yi Wentao finally couldn't help but shout. Shengguan Yu, don't be too arrogant. You. Before he could finish speaking, Chu Liwei suddenly raised his leg and stomped heavily on Yi Wentao's chest. Crack. The sound of bones breaking. Yi Wentao's face turned red. His chest caved in. Chu Liwei's stomp had broken a few of his ribs. Yi Wentao, your brother is in such a state now. If I'm not arrogant, do you think he's the arrogant one? Why don't you ask your own brother if he can still be arrogant? Chu Liwei used a lot of force in this kick, and it directly caused the energy in Yi Wentao's body to go crazy. This forced him to be unable to say a single word. He opened his mouth and forcefully spat out a few vague and bloody syllables. Yi Wentao's face was ashen. Chu Liwei's stomp was on Yi Wentao's body as well as on Family Yi's head. How could they bear it? However, they had to bear it even if they couldn't. They didn't want to see the situation turn for the worse with their own eyes. At this moment, Jun Jiuqing suddenly stepped forward and said, You've won this round. Family Yi is willing to accept defeat. Family Yi was shocked. They didn't expect Jun Jiuqing to suddenly speak at this time. One of the elders frowned and said, That's right. Young master, family head hasn't admitted defeat. Don't you think it's a little inappropriate for you to do this? Jun Jiuqing frowned slightly. A hint of coldness appeared in his eyes. Chu Liwei also laughed. Yes. The one who will be competing with me is Patriarch Yi, not any of you present here. This sentence has to be said by family head Family Yi personally. As she spoke, she lowered her head and looked at Yi Wentao. Family head Family Yi, what do you think? Yi Wentao's heart was filled with hatred. Of course, he didn't want to admit defeat in front of so many people. However, if he didn't admit defeat, the current situation was almost impossible to reverse. He closed his eyes and spoke with difficulty. Before he could say a word, Chu Liwei exerted force with her foot, forcing Yi Wentao to swallow the rest of his words. Intense pain came from all over his body, especially his chest. It seemed like there was a heavy weight on it, making it difficult for him to breathe and unable to say a word. Chu Liwei raised her eyebrows. Oh? It seems that family head Family Yi still doesn't want to admit defeat. Yi Wentao's eyes rolled back and he almost fainted from anger. At this moment, everyone in the family Yi also realized that the family head wasn't unwilling to admit defeat. It was clearly Chu Liwei who was deliberately preventing him from speaking. Since family head Yi is so stubborn, then I can only convince you with my strength. Chu Liwei shook her head regretfully and was about to continue. It seemed like she was really going to beat Yi Wentao to death. Stop. Yi Wentao hurriedly spoke, shocked and angry. Who couldn't tell that Chu Liwei was doing this on purpose? She was clearly trying to kill Yi Wentao. Chu Liwei didn't stop moving. She didn't take Yi Wentao's words seriously at all. She raised her leg and took a step to the side. Then she stepped on Yi Wentao's ankle. Crack. The sound of bones breaking was especially hair-raising. Yi Wentao didn't have any strength to retaliate. He was in so much pain that his entire body trembled. He kept vomiting blood and almost fainted. His appearance was truly miserable. Jun Jiuqing turned around and glanced at the elder who tried to stop her and sneered. Now, do you still think that what I did just now was inappropriate? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1972. The elder's expression was ugly, but he did not say a word. Although he was embarrassed by Jun Jiuqing's public questioning, it was clearly not the time to care about this. The remaining members of the family looked at each other in dismay. In fact, Jun Jiuqing was the most suitable person to step forward in this matter. He was the young master, second only to Yi Wentao. Now that Yi Wentao was in trouble, he was the only one who could represent the family Yi. Finally, someone cupped his fists. Young master, please step forward and save family head. As soon as this was said, many people immediately echoed this sentiment. Even Yi Wentao had to suppress the anger in his heart. Although he was Yi Wentao's younger brother in terms of status in the family Yi, he was now inferior to Jun Jiuqing. Jiuqing. Yi Wentao took a deep breath and urged. After all, ever since Yi Wentao was defeated, they had lost all face. The most important thing now was to save Yi Wentao. Jun Jiuqing's eyes darkened, and he took another step forward. Now that family head is unable to speak, the young master of the family Yi, Jun Jiuqing, will admit defeat on behalf of the family Yi. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows slightly, then stopped what she was doing and looked up. Just now she had heard how those people addressed Jun Jiuqing. After not seeing him for a while, he had actually become the young master of the family Yi? Chu Luiyue was not surprised. This could only prove that Jun Jiuqing's talent and strength were more outstanding than what he had shown before. Otherwise, he would not have been able to win this position in the family Yi, which was full of talents. She looked Jun Jiuqing up and down again. You will admit defeat on behalf of Yi Wentao? Jun Jiuqing nodded. That's right. As long as you stop now and release family head safely, we will agree to any conditions. There was a small commotion in the family Yi crowd, but it quickly subsided. Jun Jiuqing's words were too big, but if they didn't do it now, there was probably no other way. At this point they could tell that Chu Luiyue was extremely vicious and merciless. No one could say for sure what other shocking moves she could make. Therefore, after a brief moment of hesitation, the family Yi members chose to accept. Chu Luiyue chuckled. What qualifications do you have to bargain with me now? Yi Wentao was already in her hands. She could kill him or torture him as she pleased. Don't forget that it was your family Yi who suggested this competition. Regardless of life or death, no one was allowed to interfere. Could it be that all of you have forgotten? Jun Jiuqing frowned. Then what do you want? Yi Wentao's arms had been chopped off and he was on the verge of death. He was even lying on the ground in humiliation, allowing her to step on him. Wasn't that enough? Chu Luiyue's lips curled up slightly as she stretched out her hand. My conditions are very simple. First, the Great Azure Sun Axe belongs to me. The expressions of the family Yi members instantly became even more unsightly. The Great Azure Sun Axe was one of the 10 great sacred artifacts, and it was also the family Yi's clan treasure. Chu Luiyue's first condition was an exorbitant demand. Wasn't it too much? Some of the Nan family members' expressions were somewhat meaningful. Anyway, their flowing cloud flying diagram had already been snatched away. If the family Yi's was also snatched away by Chu Luiyue, the losses of those two families were about the same. Although the two sides had formed an alliance for the time being, both sides had vaguely had the intention of fighting openly and covertly for thousands of years. Anyway, things had already come to this. If they could make the family Yi bleed a little, the gap between them wouldn't be too big in the future. Jun Jiuqing didn't care about the reactions of the people behind him. He nodded. Okay. Chu Luiyue didn't mean his answer. She raised her eyes and looked at the ground not far away, at the Great Azure Sun Axe that was casually thrown there during the chaotic battle. Dumpling's eyes lit up. She immediately ran over and carried the Great Azure Sun Axe. Her figure was petite, and she wasn't even as tall as the Great Azure Sun Axe. She carried it on her shoulders with her two small hands. It looked like her head was heavy and her feet were light. It made people worry that she would be swayed by this huge and heavy axe. However, Dumpling quickly used her actions to shatter everyone's false fantasies. She strode forward with her bare feet and in a flash she arrived in front of Chu Luiyue. Her speed was so fast that it made people speechless. Such a large piece of axe was as light as a feather in her hands. Everyone looked at her with complicated feelings. As expected of the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, her physical strength was really strong. That's right. She was able to break Yi Wentao's arm with a whip. What was this axe to her? Why you? Here. Dumpling excitedly ran in front of Chu Luiyue and handed over the Great Azure Sun Axe. At this moment, it was covered with a thin layer of frost. Waves of cold air spread out from it. This was the mark left behind by Zichen's previous attack. Chu Luiyue took the Great Azure Sun Axe and patted Dumpling's head with praise. Dumpling is awesome. After receiving the praise, Dumpling was elated. She proudly turned her head and raised her small face at Zichen. Her intention to show off couldn't be more obvious. At the crucial moment he still had to rely on her. Chu Luiyue glanced at Dumpling and lovingly rubbed the back of her head. After all, she was still a child. She even rushed to run errands. Didn't you see that Zichen didn't move from the beginning? He didn't plan to move at all. Yet this child was still so happy. Chu Luiyue sighed silently in his heart. Probably because she was bullied by Zichen in the Heavenly Square Cauldron, Dumpling now wanted to compete with Zichen whenever she encountered a problem. Zichen stood on the spot and calmly nodded. Okay, you win this time. Dumpling put her hands on her waist. Waha, I knew it. I'm the best. Chu Luiyue, Zichen, everyone. Chu Luiyue looked at Dumpling sympathetically. She didn't know how much work she would have to do in the future when she encountered an opponent like Zichen. She coughed, looked away and looked at Yi Wentao. Family head Yi, you don't have any objections, right? How could Yi Wentao say no? He closed his eyes and nodded with difficulty. Chu Luiyue smiled. Family head Yi is indeed generous. My second condition is actually very simple. I want 30 venerable divine artifacts. Digression, insomnia, I'll take a break. I'll come back at 6 p.m. Woo mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1973. Yi Wentao's face flushed red. He widened his eyes and stared at Chu Luiyue. Although he didn't say anything, his reaction was enough to show his attitude. Yi Wentao couldn't help but shout. Shangguan Yu, you're too greedy. 30 venerable artifacts? Why didn't she rob them? Chu Luiyue clicked his tongue and looked regretful. Family Yi, it seems that in your brother's eyes your life isn't as important as those dead objects. Yi Wentao trembled with anger. What nonsense are you talking about? When did I say that? You're the one who's greedy and demanding an exorbitant price. Do you know how much 30 venerable artifacts are worth? Chu Luiyue looked like she was smiling, and her eyes were filled with coldness. If that's the case then, do you know how much my peach blossom dock is worth? This question immediately made Yi Wentao speechless. The rest of the people who wanted to argue and criticize him also shut their mouths. The scene fell into an eerie silence. 30 venerable artifacts were indeed a sky-high price, but it was not on the same level as Peach Blossom Dock. Venerable artifacts could be made as long as there were venerable artificers. As for the number, it was just a matter of time. It was worth noting that Shangguan Jing alone had many venerable artifacts that had survived. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to give away so many at once during Rong Xiu's wedding. Therefore, for someone like Family Yi who had a strong foundation, they could definitely afford 30 venerable artifacts. However, it would cost them a lot. However, a place like Peach Blossom Dock was even more precious. It could only be found by chance. Otherwise, it wouldn't have attracted so many aristocratic families over thousands of years to try to take it under their command. Wasn't Family Yi's whole family here for this? At the end of the day, they were the ones who first tried to snatch Chu Luiyue's Peach Blossom Dock. Now that Chu Luiyue had won the bet and had the upper hand, it seemed, there was nothing wrong with making such a request. The two sides fell into a short standoff. Chu Luiyue looked relaxed. The reason she wanted these things was simple. The Yu residence has just been established, so there isn't enough stock. There were quite a lot of natural treasures here, and there were also many experts who came to seek refuge. However, there were almost no divine artifacts that could be taken out. Although Chu Luiyue was a weapon refiner herself, it was impossible for her to support the entire Yu residence by herself. Now that there was ready-made wool, it would be a waste not to harvest it. What a great opportunity. Chu Luiyue felt that he had asked for too little. However, considering that Yi Wentao had already lost both his arms and was basically half dead, she decided to give him a discount. After all, she sincerely wanted to complete this deal. She had to show them her sincerity, right? If Family Yi knew what Chu Luiyue was thinking, they would probably vomit blood in anger. Jun Jiuqing turned around and looked at everyone. Elders, what do you think? Everyone groaned inwardly. What else could they do? Could it be that they could refuse? The head of the family was still in Chu Luiyue's hands. Moreover, according to the agreement between the two sides, even if she really killed Yi Wentao today, Family Yi had no right or position to hold her accountable. After a while, someone finally said, "As long as we can save the head of the family, we'll do whatever it takes." The rest of the people chimed in and expressed their agreement. Jun Jiuqing's gaze swept across them before he looked at Chu Luiyue again. "I can agree to your two conditions on behalf of Family Yi. Don't be in such a hurry. I'm not done yet." Chu Luiyue interrupted Jun Jiuqing with a smile. "Thirdly, from now on, Family Yi must avoid anyone from the Yu residence if they encounter anyone from the Yu residence. If Family Yi uses today's incident as a reason to provoke the Yu residence in the future, I'll kill whoever comes. If two come, I'll kill both." She raised her chin as she spoke. "To prevent anyone from going back on their word, I'll have to trouble you to personally write a post as proof." Family Yi was stunned. They never expected Chu Luiyue to make such a request. Jun Jiuqing reacted quickly. He pursed his lips and finally chose to agree. Sure. Then he took out a pen and paper from his universe ring and began to write. Family Yi watched him write with complicated expressions. Object? What about Yi Wentao? Agree? This matter was truly too aggrieving. They had thought that they would return victorious today. Who would have thought that they would end up like this? This level of humiliation was akin to ceding territory as compensation. The atmosphere on Family Yi's side was oppressive and tense. Everyone's expression was extremely ugly. Today was a day of humiliation for the entire Yi family. Jun Jiuqing finished writing quickly and flicked his wrist. The piece of paper quickly flew toward Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue raised her hand to catch it and scrutinized it. Jun Jiuqing did not have any ulterior motives this time. He had written everything according to her instructions. Chu Luiyue nodded in satisfaction. Can you let her go now? Jun Jiuqing asked. Don't be hasty. There's still one last step. Chu Luiyue smiled unhurriedly. This piece of paper without a signature is useless. Jun Jiuqing frowned slightly. I've already written my name on it. He was the young master of Family Yi. Moreover, with Yi Wentao's current state, he would probably give up the position of the family head soon. When that time came, Jun Jiuqing would directly take over the entire Family Yi. It would be the same if he was in charge. However, Chu Luiyue wanted more than that. Whoever provoked today's matter will be responsible. As Chu Luiyue spoke, she suddenly raised her hand. Something flew over from the side. It was an arm that had been cut off. Everyone present could see that it was Yi Wentao's arm. Just as everyone was shocked and confused, wondering what Chu Luiyue's intentions were, they saw a light and shiny dagger suddenly appear in Chu Luiyue's hand. Then she flicked her wrist and the dagger flew out quickly. A finger was silently cut off and flew towards Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue caught the severed finger and then printed a bright red fingerprint on the piece of paper. Then, she threw the severed finger aside and took out a white handkerchief to wipe her hand carefully. Then she burned the handkerchief. The whole process was smooth and smooth. It was as if it was not a severed arm or finger, but an unrelated object. Finally, she shook the contract and scrutinized it before nodding in satisfaction. It's done. As she spoke, she took a step back and bowed slightly with a smile. Family, thank you very much. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1974. Chu Luiyue was sincere. If it weren't for Yi Wentao, she wouldn't have had the chance to obtain so many treasures. This was a business that would definitely be profitable without any losses. Although it was a little torturous, but, to her and the entire Peach Blossom dock, the final outcome was extremely good. Yi Wentao glared at Chu Luiyue viciously, as if he wanted to skin her alive. He had heard and seen with his own eyes how he had lost so many items and was even humiliated. How could he bear this? Chu Luiyue had already retreated. Leave the divine artifacts behind. You can take the person away. These words were directed at Family Yi. Jun Jiuqing said. 30 venerable divine artifacts are too many. We can't gather them for the time being. After we go back, we'll gather them as soon as possible and send them over. Chu Luiyue suddenly stopped in her tracks and smiled. In that case, 3 days later you can bring the items to exchange for the person. Jun Jiuqing frowned slightly. But he knew Chu Luiyue too well. Since she had already said this, then no matter what others said, it was useless. He glanced at Yi Wentao. All right. As long as you can ensure the safety of the family head within these 3 days, we will naturally hand over the items. At this time they were no longer in the right to negotiate. They could only agree to whatever the other party said. Jun Jiuqing was very clear about this, so he didn't try to make any unnecessary struggles. Instead he agreed without hesitation. Chu Luiyue nodded. It's a deal. With that she looked at Cini. Cini, bring Family Yi back and have a good rest. I'm sure Family Yi is very tired after today's incident. Cini's footsteps seemed light, but in fact he was extremely fast. In a short while he arrived beside Chu Luiyue and responded respectfully. Yes. Then he personally went forward. Seeing Cini's boots and gently swaying clothes, Yi Wentao's emotions surged. His blood rushed to his heart and he finally fainted completely. Cini's expression was still very calm. He went over and brought Yi Wentao back into the barrier. Family Yi's side was naturally filled with indignation and anger, but they had no other choice but to swallow all their emotions. Jun Jiuqing looked deeply at Chu Luiyue, then turned and left. Seeing him leave, the rest of the family Yi followed one after another. If they didn't leave, they would stay here to be humiliated? Iwan's teeth were itching with hate. He couldn't accept it no matter what. Things had actually turned out like this. Nan Suhui glanced at him and snorted. Stop looking, Iwanzwa. Es not you, estes, tease to be, teat, SSD. Wentao subconsciously stopped in his tracks. Betraying Lingxiao College will be the worst decision of your life. Every word of Nan Suhuai's words fell clearly into Yi Wentao's ears. His heart suddenly thumped violently as if it was being pressed down by something. Yi Wentao closed his eyes and left. Family Yi left just like that. They were very fast. It wasn't clear if they wanted to go back and prepare the 30 venerable divine artifacts to rescue Yi Wentao as soon as possible, or if they wanted to leave this place that had humiliated them. The rest of the Nan family felt awkward. They came here to take revenge, but not only did they not succeed, they even lost their family head, Nan Yifan. From Chu Liuyue's attitude, it was clear that he wasn't willing to let them go. In the beginning, many people in the Nan family hoped to join forces with Family Yi to turn the tables. In the end, even Family Yi suffered heavy losses. Family Yi couldn't even take care of himself, let alone the Nan family Yi. If they continued to fight, they wouldn't be a match for so many venerable gods. Therefore the Nan family Yi was in a dilemma. They couldn't leave, but they couldn't stay either. After Family Yi left, Chu Liyue focused on the Nan family Yi again. Unlike how he treated Family Yi, Chu Liyue's attitude had changed a lot. Her gaze slowly swept across these people, and then she said slowly, "You're right. Most of you have been deceived by Nan Yifan, which is why you have misunderstood my Peach Blossom Cove. Now if you want to leave, you can leave. If you don't want to leave and want to take revenge for Nan Yifan and the others, the Peach Blossom Dock will accept it." She stretched out 3 fingers. "I'll count to 3. Those who want to leave, leave, and those who want to stay, stay. Once a decision is made, it can't be changed. As for which choice you should make, please consider it yourselves." Then she began to count down. 1. Everyone in the Nan family looked at each other. Chu Liyue's meaning was very clear. Now the choice was in their hands to live or die. However, this decision was indeed difficult to make. 2. The Nan family members began to quietly retreat. It seemed that Nan Yifan wouldn't be able to survive, and it was very likely that he had done those things as Chu Liyue said. Then why should they continue to stay for him? Once one person chose to leave, it would immediately lead the others to make the same choice. Soon most of the Nan family members chose to leave. Only Nan Hetian was left standing there all alone. When he realized this, Nan Hetian's expression changed. The Nan family's 1,000-year legacy can't be broken here." Before Nan Hetian could finish, someone immediately rebutted him. Nan Hetian's face turned pale. He knew that they were going to completely give up on Nan Yifan. They planned to go back and choose a new family head. 3. Chu Liyue finished the last word. She looked at Nan Hetian and tilted her head. Elder Nan Hetian is really loyal. It's touching. Then, please? The battle in Peach Blossom Dock caused a huge commotion. In a short period of time, it quickly spread throughout the entire Divine Ruins world. Chu Liyue was at the Upper God Realm and fought against the God Realm expert Yi Wentao and won. This shocking battle made Chu Liyue famous again. Peach Blossom Dock's Yu Mansion also jumped out from the countless families and clans in the Divine Ruins world and became the most dazzling existence. Digression, I'll come back quietly at 7 o'clock. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1975. The Divine Ruins world was vast and there were many cultivators. All kinds of sects and clans appeared one after another. There were many people who wanted to have a foothold here. But most of them were washed away by the waves, leaving only sighs. Because it was simply too difficult. The overall situation of the Divine Ruins world had always been relatively stable. Those third-rate or even second-rate clans might be exterminated or replaced. However, the first-rate families had deep foundations and countless experts. It was very difficult to shake them. Almost no one dared to dream of breaking this situation. However, the appearance of Peach Blossom Dock's Yu residents had finally caused a change in this situation. Who was Yi Wentao? Most people wouldn't know much about it. However, the people of the Divine Ruins world, who were truly powerful and had noble statuses, were all clearly aware of this. Even Yi Wentao had been defeated by Chu Liyue. Chu Liyue's strength was almost unimaginable. Not to mention that she was fighting above her level. Of course, many people did not believe this point. They would rather believe that Chu Liyue had hidden her true cultivation level. But no matter what, she had defeated Yi Wentao at such a young age. This was truly shocking. This was something that could not be denied no matter what. At the same time, Yi Wentao's defeat was a wake-up call to those who had been tempted to make a move against Peach Blossom Dock. Family Yi was already like this, what about others? No matter how Chu Luiyue had done it, this was the truth. Obviously, Chu Luiyue had also killed the chicken to warn the monkey this time. Moreover, she had succeeded. After countless people heard this news, they all dispelled their thoughts about Peach Blossom Dock. More people began to be curious and gradually let go of the restrictions of the Yuntian Tower's princess consort. They began to examine and think about Chu Luiyue as an independent existence. What kind of heaven-defying existence was she? Since a long time ago, there had been many rumors about her in the Divine Ruins world. Everyone was surprised, shocked, and curious. Every time they thought that she had reached her limit, she would always do something even crazier and more shocking, announcing to everyone, she was stronger than they had expected. Now, she had finally occupied the Peach Blossom Dock and established the Yu residence. With an independent and powerful stance, she had officially entered the Divine Ruins world. The outside world was abuzz with rumors, but Peach Blossom Dock did not seem to be affected at all. After the battle ended, the city was filled with joy. Compared to the shock of Shengguan Jing and the others, the people in the city did not seem to be surprised by this result. They celebrated happily. In fact, by the time Chu Luiyue and his entourage returned to the Yu residence, a celebratory feast had already been prepared. After experiencing the shocking changes in the Peach Blossom Cove, Chu Luiyue had become a godlike figure in everyone's eyes. It was as if no matter what amazing things she had done, it was only natural. Shengguan Jing and the others followed Chu Luiyue all the way back to the Yu mansion. Only then did they realize that the Peach Blossom Cove was indeed Chu Luiyue's. The people here addressed her as Yu Zhu, with great reverence and admiration. One must know that the Peach Blossom Dock had always been filled with crooks and honest people. There was no lack of thorns and troublesome people. However, in front of Chu Luiyue, these people were all very obedient. Everyone could tell that she had absolute authority here. As long as she gave the order, these people would not hesitate to risk their lives and charge. This kind of cohesion was shocking. This question lingered in the minds of Shengguan Jing, Zhao Song and the others. It was only until they heard about the things that happened in the Peach Blossom Dock that they finally understood. At the same time, they were even more shocked. The entire process was actually filled with danger. If there were any problems in the process, Chu Luiyue might have already lost her life. But fortunately, everything was in the past. Now, Chu Luiyue was the faith of everyone in the Peach Blossom Dock. Even though this place had just started to integrate, its future fighting strength might not be inferior to those first-rate families in the Divine Ruins world. Those who should be locked up were locked up and those who should be killed were killed. Chu Luiyue handed these matters over to Cin Yi. She had always been very assured when he did things. This celebratory banquet lasted until night time. Sanson even specially ordered people to prepare a grand firework to celebrate. Chu Luiyue did not care at first, but Sanson had always liked these things. Today he had vented his anger and achieved a great victory, so she simply let him be. In the black night sky, the dazzling fireworks bloomed like a moving picture. Chu Luiyue stood in the courtyard and looked up. In the depths of those black eyes, a brilliant light was reflected, sparkling brightly. She exhaled softly as her eyes flickered. In fact, even she did not expect things to progress so smoothly. You are. A familiar voice sounded. Chu Luiyue turned her head and smiled. Taizu? Why are you here too? The front courtyard was lively. After staying for a while, she said that she would come here to take a breather. She did not expect Taizu to be here too. Shengguan Jing looked at her with emotion and relief. I'm here because I have something to discuss with you. Chu Luiyue was a little surprised. Taizu rarely showed such a cautious and serious look to her. It was as if he had made up his mind. She also straightened her shoulders and said seriously, "What's the matter? Just say it." Taizu coughed. Actually it's not a big deal, but it's not a small one either. It's just that Zhao Song and the others also want to stay in the Yu residence. Stay in the Yu residence. Not the Peach Blossom Dock. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1976. The difference between the two was huge. A hint of surprise flashed across Chu Luiyue's calm eyes. Stay in the Yu mansion? Is this Senior Zhao Song and the others' idea? Shengguan Jing nodded. He knew that Chu Luiyue was very smart, so he said it directly. Originally they wanted Zhao Song to come and tell you personally, but he felt that it was a little abrupt, so he asked me to pass the message. After all, this request was indeed surprising. Chu Luiyue thought for a moment. Seeing that she was deep in thought, Shang Wanjing immediately said, "You can think about this matter yourself. Don't think about anything else. If you think it's inconvenient, I'll go and refuse them. Taizu, don't be anxious." Chu Luiyue couldn't help but laugh and quickly persuade him. "I don't think it's inconvenient, but I'm a little surprised. Besides, staying in the Yu mansion means. It meant that these people would follow her in the future. Those people were all strong masters of the supreme realm. Senior Zhao Song and the others are all top masters of the world. I'm very happy that they have this idea. It's also because of this that this matter needs to be carefully considered." Sheng Wanjing couldn't help but laugh. "Girl, it's okay if others say this, but it's not appropriate for you to say it. Don't forget that even Yi Wentao was defeated by you. He's still locked up in the dungeon of the Yu mansion." Chu Luiyue pursed her lips and smiled. "It's mainly because of the help of Dumpling and Ziqin. Otherwise I wouldn't have won that match." Sheng Wanjing looked at her, his eyes clear and bright. It could be seen that she really thought so. Sheng Wanjing was secretly gratified and proud. Yu Er's temperament was indeed excellent. Not to mention a Supreme Realm Master like her, even a Supreme Realm Master could boast about defeating Yi Wentao. After winning, this child didn't become impetuous or complacent. It was really rare. This also made him more confident. This girl's future would definitely be limitless. But they are your contracted divine beasts, not anyone else's. Therefore in the end you've won this round. Sheng Wanjing stroked his beard. Actually, most of Zhao Song's group are rogue cultivators. Only a few of them are from aristocratic families. However, those were all small and insignificant families. In the Divine Ruins world, they were so insignificant that they could be ignored. If not for this, he really wouldn't have been able to invite these people to help. Some time ago, Chu Luiyue had sent him a message saying that she and Rong Xiu had met with some trouble at Peach Blossom Dock. She hoped that he could invite some people to help. As a venerable blacksmith who had once been in the limelight, of course, he had a lot of connections and resources. Logically speaking, this was not difficult to do. But the key point was, what Chu Luiyue meant by a little trouble was that they were going to be attacked by family Yi and the Nan family. In the entire Divine Ruins world, who had reached the God realm did not know of these two great families. Because of this, Sheng Wanjing had been running around quite a bit. Only people like Zhao Song, who had an extremely good relationship with him and had nothing to worry about, had chosen to come along. They were all very clear that whether they fought or not, as long as they showed their faces, it meant that they were standing on the opposite side of family Yi and the Nan family. Most people would not dare to offend them like this. After all, before they came, no one knew that things would develop like this, right? Generally speaking, these people will not have any conflicts of interest with you. They can be completely trusted. Also, if they can stay in the Yu residence, it will be beneficial for you. Peach Blossom Dock had just been taken over by Chu Luiyue and the Yu residence had just been established. Everything was still in its initial stages. Although Chu Luiyue had won against Yi Wentao, if she wanted to completely strengthen the Yu residence in Peach Blossom Dock, it was obviously not enough to rely on her alone. Any strong sect needed a certain number of experts to support it. The appearance of Zhao Song and the others was undoubtedly the best way to solve this problem. In the entire Divine Ruins world, which family could produce so many venerable god experts in a single night? Chu Luiyue pondered for a moment, then nodded lightly. "Then, please help me convey my gratitude to Senior Zhao Song and the others. I will visit them one by one tomorrow." This was a matter of great importance, so it was naturally best for her to appear personally. Sheng Wanjing knew that she was cautious and meticulous, so he relaxed and laughed heartily. "All right." In this battle, one side won and one lost. Some were happy while others were sad. Compared to the hustle and bustle in Peach Blossom Dock, no one in the faraway family Yi and the Nan family could sleep peacefully that night. Over at the Nan family, because Nan Yifan had become a captive and his son and daughter had died long ago, there was no hope for this bloodline. The remaining people all coveted the position of family head. Everyone was ready to make a move. Both openly and covertly, great waves were surging. No one cared about Nan Yifan's life or death anymore. The entire Nan family had descended into chaos. On the other side, family Yi's situation was not any better. It was early in the morning, the darkest time before dawn. In the hall, Jun Jiuqing sat in the main seat, while the remaining people were divided into two sides. The atmosphere in the entire room was cold and stagnant. Every inch of air seemed to be frozen, as if even breathing was a mistake. It was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. It was chilling. Jun Jioqing raised his eyes and looked around. Everyone hurried back to Family E and immediately came here. But after sitting down, no one spoke for a long time. In fact, they could not be blamed. Family E was used to living high and mighty. When had they ever suffered such humiliation? They were really dumbfounded. In fact, there were even some people that had yet to recover from the enormous shock that they had received. But Jun Jioqing was not among these people. Knock knock. He knocked on the table. The crisp sound woke many people up. Everyone looked over. Jun Jioqing said word by word. Family E suffered heavy losses in the Battle of Peach Blossom Dock. I understand the grief and anger in everyone's hearts. But now, the most important thing is to solve the problem in front of us as soon as possible and get out of this predicament. His words were unanimously agreed by everyone. Young master, what do you mean? What should we do now? Are we really going to send 30 venerable artifacts to Shangguanyu? Someone asked. It was painful no matter how he thought about it. Jun Jioqing raised his eyes and glanced at that person indifferently. Why don't we let them continue to detain you and humiliate you as they wish? We'll never be able to lift our heads again. His tone was very calm, but there was a hint of coldness in it. That person's face alternated between green and white. He did not speak. The room fell into silence again. In fact, at this time they knew very well that the arrow was knocked on the bow and had to be fired. Jun Jioqing raised his chin slightly. From today onwards, I will be the head of Family E. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1977. From now on, I'll be in charge of all matters concerning the Family E. Jun Jioqing's words instantly caused an uproar among the crowd. Everyone was shocked and looked at each other in dismay. Jun Jioqing was going to inherit the position of the family head at this time? Wasn't this too sudden? Young master, the succession of the position of the family head has always required the previous family head to personally confer it and hold a grand ceremony. Now that the family head is still trapped in the Peach Blossom Dock. It's a special time, so it's only natural that we have to do something special. Jun Jioqing calmly interrupted the other party. His tone was firm. Now that the Family E is in danger, the most important thing is to mobilize the entire family to save the family head. Another person couldn't help but say. But now that you're the young master and the family head isn't around, you have the same authority as the family head. Jun Jioqing suddenly laughed. Oh, is it really the same? This rhetorical question left the other person speechless. The rest of the crowd fell silent. The young master and the family head had different statuses. Naturally, the authority in their hands was different. Even if Jun Jioqing was the young master, he still had no authority over many people and matters in the Family E. Only by becoming the family head could he have complete control over the Family E. However, many people in the Family E were unwilling to accept this. Even though Jun Jioqing was the young master personally chosen by Yi Wentao. But his surname was Jun after all. Jun Jioqing. How could such a person become the family head of the Family E? The reason why the crowd didn't openly object before was mainly because this was the person chosen by Yi Wentao. They originally thought that they would make do with it until the right time to think of a way to pull Jun Jioqing down. After all, there were some outstanding people among the younger generation of the Family E. Why would they have to accept an outsider like Jun Jioqing? Who would have thought that something would happen to Yi Wentao before that day even arrived? On the other hand, Jun Jioqing was even more ruthless. At this time, he directly proposed to take over the position of the family head. I'm sure I don't need to tell you about the E family's current situation. Everyone should be well aware of it. Jun Jioqing's voice was as casual as usual, but it carried a strong pressure that could not be disobeyed. As for the reason why everyone disagrees, I also understand it very well. But at this time, the family's interests were the most important. If anyone wants to disregard the lives of the Family E and the hundreds and thousands of clansmen for their own selfish interests, then don't blame me for being impolite. With such a huge accusation, many people's faces paled. They wanted to say something but stopped. Listen to what he said. Those who didn't agree to his suggestion seemed to be betraying their families. But they couldn't find a reason to refute it. Jun Jioqing's eyes scanned the crowd and finally curled up the corner of his mouth. Very good. Since everyone agrees, then, from today onwards I will be the new family head of Family E. 2 days later, I will personally go to Peach Blossom Cove. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Early in the morning, Chu Luiwei woke up. With a thought, she summoned the sun-great azure axe. The huge black axe quietly floated in the air. It was covered with a thin layer of frost. This was the power that Zichen left behind to suppress the sun-great azure axe. Because Chu Luiyue didn't have time to remove the connection between the sun-great azure axe and Yi Wentao, she was worried that it would cause trouble, so she simply continued to use this power to suppress it. What are you looking at? Rong Xiu, who had just finished his morning exercise, walked in and saw Chu Luiyue staring at the sun-great azure axe. Chu Luiyue came back to her senses and looked at him. Nothing. I just want to see what kind of treasures the 10 great sacred artifacts are. It was already very impressive for an ordinary noble family to have one sacred artifact, but she had several in her hands. Even she herself felt that it was somewhat inconceivable. Upon hearing this, Rong Xiu's scarlet lips curved up. He walked over and kissed her lightly on the lips. What do you think? His smile still carried a hint of nonchalance and carefreeness. Chu Luiyue hesitated for a moment as if she wanted to say something. Rong Xiu noticed and stared at her. Oh? His voice was low and pleasant, and he was very close to Chu Luiyue now. His warm breath landed on Chu Luiyue's face with a familiar cold fragrance. Chu Luiyue's face heated up. She coughed and pulled herself back from her thoughts. I think there's something wrong. Come and take a look. As she spoke, she summoned the heavenly square cauldron and the flowing cloud flying diagram. The 3 sacred artifacts floated side by side, emitting a faint pressure. Rong Xiu looked at them. You think there's something wrong with these things? Chu Luiyue hesitated for a moment and nodded. These 3 sacred artifacts seem to... She paused and frowned as if she was considering how to speak. I think their auras are somewhat similar. She softened her voice and looked at Rong Xiu. What do you think? There was a moment of silence in the room. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. What do you mean? Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes dangerously. You're also a weapon refiner. Don't tell me you can't tell. Rong Xiu's skill in weapon refinement had always been above hers. If even she could sense it, then he must be able to sense it too. Rong Xiu couldn't help but laugh and then nodded. That's right. These 3 sacred artifacts are indeed somewhat similar in some ways. Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly skipped a beat. Do you know why? She always felt that Rong Xiu seemed to have an extraordinary understanding of many things. So this time she still felt that he should know something. As expected, Rong Xiu nodded. He suddenly turned his head and looked at Chu Luiyue. A faint smile appeared on his noble and incomparable face. They were made by the same weapon refiner. Naturally, their auras are somewhat similar. For a moment, Chu Luiyue didn't even realize what he meant. After a while, she sucked in a breath of cold air. You mean these 3 were made by the same weapon refiner? Rong Xiu pondered for a moment. It should be 5 of the 10 great sacred artifacts were made by the same person. Digression. 6 o'clock, mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1978. Chu Luiyue was shocked at first, but then she asked subconsciously, who? Rong Xiu pondered for a moment and explained, rumor has it that he was a blacksmith from 10,000 years ago. He was extremely talented and powerful. People don't know his specific name, so they only call him Mr. Su. After leaving behind these 5 sacred artifacts, he disappeared without a trace. Chu Luiyue suddenly thought of something and continued to ask, what about the remaining 5? Could it be? Rong Xiu looked at her with a smile. That's right. The remaining 5 were refined by another person. And this person was very famous. He was the top blacksmith in the Divine Ruins world at that time, Tang Ku. Chu Luiyue had heard of this name before. In other words, almost all blacksmiths knew this person. Tang Ku was born in an ordinary clan, but he was extremely talented in blacksmithing. After he became famous, his entire clan became one of the most powerful clans at that time because of him. Unfortunately, there was one time when he was blacksmithing and he was careless and had an accident. After his death, the Tang family also quickly declined and was eventually annihilated. However, Chu Luiyue didn't know that half of the 10 sacred artifacts were refined by Tang Ku. How do you know everything? Chu Luiyue muttered and asked the question in her heart. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. This matter is recorded in Smelt. Among the blacksmiths, almost everyone knows about it. You only know about it now. Smelt was considered an introductory book for blacksmiths in the Divine Ruins world. It recorded some very basic blacksmiths content, as well as the deeds of many powerful blacksmiths. Any cultivator who wanted to become a blacksmith would study it carefully. However, Chu Luiyue was an exception. She really hadn't read this book. Because she only started to come into contact with blacksmiths after she went to Lingxiao College. At that time the person who took her in was Rong Xiu. She was very talented and understood everything very quickly, so she directly skipped this most important part. So much so that even though she already had 3 saint artifacts in her possession, she still didn't know where they came from. Chu Luiyue touched his nose awkwardly. Ahem, you didn't say anything back then? Rong Xiu had helped her pick out a lot of related books, most of which were quite profound. She was busy researching those things all day long, so she didn't pay much attention to it. Rong Xiu raised his hand. There was a gentle smile in his almond-shaped eyes. All right, it's all my husband's fault. Chu Luiyue glared at him. Her watery eyes had a rare hint of innocence and charm. Rong Xiu's heart fluttered as he looked at her, and he pulled her into his embrace with his long arms. Actually, the 10 great sacred artifacts are indeed very interesting. At that time, Tangku was already famous. She was the most prestigious artificer in the entire Divine Ruins world. Countless cultivators paid him a visit and offered their best services, all for the sake of asking him to refine a suitable divine artifact. But Tangku's temper is very strange and she has very high requirements. Very few people can ask her to help. Chu Luiyue nodded. The status of artificers was extremely high, not to mention that she was one of the best. It was normal for such a person to be arrogant because of her talent. Later, Mr. Su suddenly appeared out of nowhere and personally challenged Tangku to a competition to determine the winner. Rong Xiu held Chu Luiyue's slender white fingers and played with them. Tangku didn't want to pay attention to such a nameless junior, but probably because no one had challenged her for too long, she finally chose to accept the challenge. The two of them have been competing for a total of 3 years. Chu Luiyue opened her eyes slightly. 3 years? Then the 10 saint artifacts. Rong Xiu smiled and nodded. The 10 saint artifacts were all refined in those 3 years. Chu Luiyue sucked in a breath of cold air. In 3 years the two of them had each refined 5 saint artifacts. How much patience and energy did they have to spend? A saint artifact was of a higher level than a venerable artifact. It was extremely precious and difficult to refine. Even someone as powerful as the great ancestor could only refine a venerable one divine weapon to this day. He once said that he hadn't even touched the threshold of a saint artifact. But Tangku and Mr. Su had not only refined it but more than one. The two of them were considered to be tied in this battle. And Mr. Su's reputation rose from then on. But this person was very mysterious. Almost no one knew his name and appearance. And not long after he disappeared. Half a year later Tangku passed away. Chu Luiyue was a little surprised. It sounded like the ending of the two of them was a little inexplicable. After Tangku's death the Tang family was in chaos. Everyone eyed them covetously and attacked them in groups. When the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. Very soon the Tang family declined. But the point was, the saint artifacts that everyone found in the Tang family were not 5, but 10. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. Mr. Su's 5 saint artifacts are also, that's right. The 10 saint artifacts refined by the two of them were actually taken back by Tangku. It's just that no one knew about this matter. After the Tang family fell, the world knew about it. And in order to compete for the 10 saint artifacts, the families fought again. After a chaotic battle, some of the 10 saint artifacts were forcibly snatched and kept for themselves. Some were lost and their whereabouts were unknown since then. And because no one had successfully refined a new saint artifact from then on, those 10 saint artifacts were called the 10 great saint artifacts. So, the so-called ranking is also decided by the descendants? Rong Xiu smiled and nodded. Actually, there's no ranking. Since they're all saint artifacts, there's not much difference between them. It's just that they specialize in different things. Moreover, an item of this grade would display different powers in different people's hands. Isn't that the same with your flowing cloud flying diagram? The Nan family carefully kept the flowing cloud flying diagram for so many years, but they never really understood it. On the contrary, Chu Luiyue became the new owner of the flowing cloud flying diagram as soon as he got it. It's not that the flowing cloud flying diagram's combat power is insufficient. It's just that the people of the Nan family didn't notice it. Who knew if the other saint artifacts were the same? Chu Luiyue looked at the 3 saint artifacts in front of him and narrowed his eyes. Then these three items were all made by Mr. Su. Rong Xiu said. Although no one had personally witnessed the battle between Tangku and Mr. Su, the world still knew who had created those divine weapons. Chu Luiyue nodded thoughtfully. No wonder he felt that the aura on them was somewhat similar. It turned out that they really came from the same source. Knock knock. Just as Chu Luiyue was lost in thought, there was a sudden knock on the door. Your Highness, Princess, someone from the family Yi is here. It was Yan Qing's voice. Chu Luiyue stood up from Rong Xiu's arms, put away the 3 saint artifacts and walked out of the door. Rong Xiu also followed. Who's here? Chu Luiyue asked. Yan Qing's expression changed slightly and he bowed his head. Someone, the head of the family Yi, Jun Jiuqing. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1979. The head of the family Yi. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows slightly and chewed on these words with interest. He's really fast. She had long expected that Jun Jiuqing would not sit still after returning, but she did not expect him to react so quickly. It had only been 3 days, but he had changed from the young master to the head of the family. His identity was actually a little sensitive in the family Yi. Chu Luiyue could tell that the people of the family Yi were not completely respectful and convinced of him. Under such circumstances, he must have used some tricks to become the head of the family so quickly. Rong Xiu narrowed his eyes dangerously and smiled faintly. Yi Wentao is trapped in the peach blossom dock and his arms have been chopped off. He is no different from a disabled person. In addition, he lost miserably in the battle with you and lost face. Even if he could return to the family Yi, he obviously could not be the head of the family. The family Yi was like a dragon without a head, so it was a good time to take over. As the young master, Jun Jiuqing had the advantage. Moreover, he had Yi Wentao's endorsement. It was not difficult for him to win this round. Chu Luiyue turned to look at him and blinked. My husband. Do you smell vinegar? Chu Luiyue wrinkled her nose slightly and raised her hand to fan it. Where did it come from? Before she could finish her sentence, Rong Xiu had already put his arm around her waist. I don't mind carrying you there. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. It seemed that if Chu Luiyue continued to speak, he really intended to carry her away. Chu Luiyue immediately shut her mouth obediently. She pursed her lips slightly and made a zipper over her mouth. According to her understanding of Rong Xiu, he was really capable of doing such a thing. Rong Xiu nodded with satisfaction, pulled her hand down and bent down to kiss her red lips. Then your husband will go with madam. When Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu arrived at the city gate again, Jun Jiuqing was already waiting outside the barrier for a while. Behind him were 2 elders. Compared to the previous battle formation, it was indeed much weaker. That's how it should be. They were the losers. Today they were the ones who brought the items to redeem their people. Naturally, they were inferior in terms of imposing manner. The 2 elders behind him had mixed feelings when they saw that the place had been cleaned up. If he hadn't personally experienced it, no one would have thought that an intense battle had broken out here 3 days ago. It was also here that family Yi's reputation was swept to the ground and she was humiliated. When they thought about what they were here for today, the 2 of them felt even more awkward. Family Yi was used to being high and mighty. Who could bear to fall after one move? However, Jun Jiuqing stood there with a calm expression. There was no sign of embarrassment on his face. Only when he saw Rong Xiu and Chu Luiyue holding hands and walking over together, a hint of emotion flashed across his eyes. Chu Luiyue looked him up and down. She didn't know if it was an illusion, but she felt that Jun Jiuqing's aura seemed to be stronger than before. I haven't seen you for a few days, but I don't know how to address you. The current Jun Jiuqing was the head of family Yi, but his surname was Jun. Jun Jiuqing's expression didn't change. It's just a surname. It's not very important. Master you can just call me Master Family Yi. He calmed himself down and continued, I'm sorry. Today I've come to keep the appointment. The 30 venerable divine artifacts are all here. As he spoke, he took off the interspatial ring in his hand and threw it over. Rong Xiu raised his chin. Yan Qing. Yan Qing immediately stepped forward and caught the interspatial ring. This interspatial ring was ownerless, so Yan Qing easily counted the things inside. After confirming that there was no problem, she handed it over with both hands. Princess, 30 pieces, no more, no less. Chu Luiyue took the interspatial ring, quickly checked it, and nodded in satisfaction. Please invite the head of family Yi. Oh no, the former head of family Yi here. Digression, I'll be back at 7 o'clock. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1980. Yi Wentao had been locked up in the dungeon for the past 3 days. He was a god after all, so his recovery ability was pretty good. Although he had lost both his arms, at least he was still alive. Of course, this was also at Chu Luiyue's behest. She was planning to sell Yi Wentao for a good price, so of course she had to take good care of him. Therefore, during this period Yi Wentao was not deliberately mistreated. On the contrary, he was treated quite well. But now Yi Wentao only felt that this was a mockery and humiliation to him. The 3 days were long and torturous. Each day felt like a year to him. When he was brought out and saw Chu Luiyue and Jun Jiuqing inside and outside the ward, the anger and resentment in his heart reached its peak. Chu Luiyue shook the interspatial ring and said with a smile, "Yi Wentao, the family Yi really treats you with sincerity. They said that there were 30 pieces and not a single one was missing. Moreover, all of them were of high grade. If I had to find a way to raise them myself, I don't know how much time and effort it would take. Thank you very much." Yi Wentao was filled with hatred, but he did not say anything. He just looked deeply at Chu Luiyue and closed his eyes. After a few days he had become much more haggard. There were still mottled blood stains on his face and he looked very miserable. Anyone who saw him would find it hard to believe that this was the former high-spirited head of the family Yi. Chu Luiyue lifted her chin slightly, and the two people behind Yi Wentao were about to escort Yi Wentao away. "I can walk on my own." Yi Wentao finally opened his mouth and opened his eyes. Deep resentment flashed in his eyes. The two people looked at Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue nodded indifferently and said with a smile, "If he wants to walk on his own, let him. After all, he's the previous head of family Yi. We have to give him some face." Yi Wentao had just taken a step forward when he heard this. He stopped abruptly and looked at Chu Luiyue in disbelief. Previous patriarch? What was the meaning of this? The next moment he seemed to have realized something. He turned his neck stiffly and looked at Jun Jiuqing. He didn't need to ask to know what had happened. Jun Jiuqing actually took advantage of these few days to directly rise to the top? Yes, of course he would do that. This was the best time to begin with. Yi Wentao could not help but smile bitterly. What was he still dreaming about? Now that he had returned to family Yi, it was impossible for him to be the same as before. And all of this was thanks to Chu Luiyue. "Yi Wentao." Rong Xiu suddenly spoke and his voice was calm. "I had always thought that you were a smart person." Yi Wentao's face was pale. Now he finally understood why Rong Xiu had not made a move. He had long expected this day to come. He did it on purpose. Yi Wentao's chest shook. He spat out a mouthful of blood and almost fell to the ground. "Patriarch," Jun Jiuqing frowned. Yi Wentao laughed sarcastically. Yes, he was not dead yet. The family Yi would still address him as patriarch. However, the way he addressed her as patriarch was completely different from before. He took a deep breath and forced down the thick taste of blood between his lips and teeth. He forced himself to continue walking forward. The surroundings were silent. Everyone's eyes were focused on Yi Wentao. Everyone had different thoughts. Yi Wentao felt as if there was a knife on his back. However, he knew that the more angry and resentful he was, the more he had to calm down. Step by step, he slowly and steadily walked to the edge of the barrier. Ripples spread out from the surface of the rock. An exit slowly appeared. Yi Wentao closed his eyes. Just a few days ago he was still thinking about how to break this barrier. He did not expect that in the blink of an eye, he would be reduced to such a state. He waved away all the messy thoughts in his mind and finally walked out. The two elders standing behind Jun Jiuqing immediately stepped forward to support him. However, Yi Wentao nailed them to the ground with a look. Although he was now the previous patriarch of the family Yi and was almost a cripple, he had been in this position for too long and had accumulated a lot of pressure. Even if he did not speak, his pressure was still there. Jun Jiuqing's eyes moved slightly and his voice turned cold. "What are you waiting for? Can't you see that the patriarch is seriously injured and needs help?" Although he was young, his words were dignified without being angry. They carried an awe-inspiring pressure that made people subconsciously obey. The two elders looked at each other and saw the difficult look in each other's eyes. This Yi Wentao clearly meant that he did not need anyone's help. Jun Jiuqing's words at this time, wasn't it obvious that he was deliberately going against him? Yi Wentao did not expect Jun Jiuqing to do this. He was shocked and angry. This kid. How could he be so scheming? On the surface, this was just a matter of words. However, in reality, it was a power struggle between the old and new patriarchs. The atmosphere froze for a moment. The two elders finally made up their minds and walked toward Yi Wentao. This choice was actually very easy to make. One was the new patriarch with top-notch talent and strength, while the other was the old patriarch who had become a cripple and had even caused the entire family Yi to suffer great humiliation. Who would rule the family Yi in the future? Wasn't it obvious at a glance? Yi Wentao's heart turned cold. He knew very well that if he did not have any other trump cards, he would be trampled under others' feet forever. Sometimes, falling from the clouds to the quagmire was just the price of making a wrong choice. Iwentao. Chu Luiyue suddenly opened her mouth and called out to him. Iwentao snapped out of his daze and turned his head to look at her. Chu Luiyue's lips curved slightly and her eyes curved. However, the corners of her eyes and the tips of her brows revealed a bone-chilling coldness. She said word by word, "I hate it when people rob me of my things." Everything that happened today was what he deserved. Iwentao's chest and abdomen seemed to be on fire, almost driving him crazy. He forced himself to retract his gaze. Now that he had fallen to such a state, there was no need to continue listening to these words. Besides, Chu Luiyue did not seem to care about his cold reaction and continued, "What you want to rob is clearly not Peach Blossom Cove, but you use this as an excuse to deceive the entire family into paying for you. Iwentao, you really have a good plan." Iwentao's heart skipped a beat. His eyes were filled with disbelief. She knew? She knew. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1981. After Chu Luiyue finished speaking, everyone present turned to look at Iwentao. Especially the two elders standing beside him, their faces were filled with bewilderment and suspicion. Family Head was not here for Peach Blossom Doc? What else could he be here for? Was there anything more precious than Peach Blossom Doc here? However, at this point, Chu Luiyue did not seem to have any reason to lie. The two elders looked at each other suspiciously. If Iwentao had really sacrificed Family E for his own personal gain, then, dead silence, the surrounding space became suffocating. For a moment, Iwentao was confused. He forcefully suppressed the urge to turn around and lowered his eyes slightly, hiding all the ripples in his eyes. After a while, he said coldly and hurriedly, "I don't know what you're talking about." After that, he continued walking forward, as if he did not want to pay attention to Chu Luiyue's nonsense. Chu Luiyue shrugged. "Family E, it doesn't matter if you know or not. Anyway, from now on, you just need to understand that you should never covet something that is not yours. Otherwise, next time. I can't guarantee that Family E will not pay a greater price for your life." Every word of these two sentences was like a steel needle, piercing Iwentao's heart so hard that it was almost a bloody mess. He walked stiffly to Jun Jiuqing's side. The two of them looked at each other. Jun Jiuqing narrowed his eyes slightly, as if he was thinking about something. Iwentao's heart skipped a beat. Did Jun Jiuqing believe Chu Luiyue's words? Just as his heart was filled with bewilderment, Jun Jiuqing laughed again. "It's great that Family Head can return safely. Let's go back now." As he spoke, his attitude was respectful and polite. It was as if the undercurrent was all an illusion. Iwentao's heart sank. Only then did he realize that Jun Jiuqing was more ambitious than he had expected. His means were also stronger. He had chosen Jun Jiuqing as the young master because there was no one in the Family Yi's younger generation who could compare to Jun Jiuqing. On the other hand, Jun Jiuqing had always been polite and respectful in front of him. Therefore he was quite satisfied with Jun Jiuqing. In the end, he disregarded the Family Yi's objections and gave him the position of young master. Who knew? That was all his disguise. Iwentao was certain that from the day Jun Jiuqing returned to Family E, or even before that, he had been planning to rise to the top. However, it was already too late for him to understand this now. Iwentao could only hope that Chu Luiyue's words didn't make Jun Jiuqing suspicious. Even if he was suspicious, he didn't want to find out what was going on. He pretended to be calm and nodded. The group didn't say anything else and quickly left. After a while, their figures completely disappeared from sight. "It seems that you're really sick of Iwentao." Rong Xiu suddenly spoke with a smile on his lips. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. "Why do you say that?" Rong Xiu bent his finger and gently tapped her forehead. "You know the answer. When Iwentao left just now, she didn't have to say those words. But she still said it." "What?" "Of course, it was because she didn't want Iwentao to go back and live a good life. Sometimes, as long as a seed of doubt was planted, it could easily destroy everything. Iwentao was already in a difficult situation. If she added fuel to the fire, it was easy to imagine what kind of situation he would face when he went back." Chu Luiyue blinked. "You know me best, my husband. Iwentao was too greedy. He wanted the Peach Blossom Dock and the Armillary Shield. How could there be such a good thing in the world? Everything that happened today was his own doing. This time I can finally have some peace and quiet for a while." Chu Luiyue stretched herself. During this period of time, all kinds of things had happened. She hadn't had a good rest for a long time. Rong Xiao squeezed her hand, his eyes full of love. But he knew that these were all things that had to be done. How could it be so easy to have a place in the world of God? Moreover, if he interfered too much, it would inevitably make people think that she had relied on him and the Yuntian Tower to achieve what she had today. If that happened, it would undoubtedly erase her radiance. That wasn't the result that Rong Xiao wanted to see. Therefore, even if he wanted to intervene countless times, he still restrained himself in the end. Go back and have a good rest. Leave the rest to them. After this fierce battle, the Peach Blossom Dock indeed quickly regained its peace. Family E and the Nan family's crushing defeat made countless restless aristocratic families and clans give up. Chu Luiyue left most of the aftermath to Tsin Yi and Sanson. Sanson was very familiar with the Peach Blossom Dock, and Tsin Yi was even more skilled and resourceful. With the two of them working together, they quickly cleaned up the mess. The people of the Nan family who had been detained before, including Nan Yifan, were all executed. Nan Yifan's head was even hung outside the city gates for 3 days and 3 nights. This was Chu Luiyue's warning to the entire world of God. Logically speaking, the Nan family should be furious with such humiliation. But at this time they didn't have the time to care about this. Because the entire Nan family had already sunk into an intense internal conflict. In addition, they had already lost several elders, and the family's strength had been greatly reduced. The current situation was one disaster after another. How could they care about anything else? 3 days later. In the room, Chu Luiyue sat cross-legged. She swallowed a pill and closed her eyes. The origin power in her body kept surging out of her dantian and into her limbs and bones. After a long time, she opened her eyes and let out a long breath. "I've finally fully recovered," she muttered softly. Actually, the battle between her and Yi Wentao wasn't as simple as it seemed. Yi Wentao was a god after all. Even though she had Zi Qin and Dumpling's help, she still suffered some internal injuries during the battle. Fortunately, it wasn't serious. Now that she had cultivated a divine body, her recovery was stronger than before. After a few days of recuperation, she was finally fully recovered. She stood up and planned to go out for a walk. The moment she opened the door, she saw Tsin Yi walking over. "Master." Tsin Yi stepped forward and bowed. Chu Luiyue looked at him in surprise. "Tsin Yi? Why are you here?" He should be at the Door Realm now. In the past, Peach Blossom Cove was a mixed bag of good and bad people. The Door Realm could be entered and exited as one pleased. After the Black Sword Sect's people came, they occupied and controlled the Door Realm. Ever since the Black Sword Sect's army was wiped out, Chu Luiyue transferred a group of people from the Yu residence to guard the Door Realm. Now that Peach Blossom Cove was on the right track, Chu Luiyue started to consider increasing the defenses of the Door Realm. Tsin Yi had received orders to investigate in the morning. She didn't expect him to return at noon. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1982. Tsin Yi bowed slightly. "Master, the situation in the Gate Realm is a little special. I'm afraid you'll have to go there personally." Chu Luiyue was stunned. Special situation? Wasn't it just a Gate Realm? What could be special about it? But seeing Tsin Yi's serious expression, Chu Luiyue nodded. Okay. The reason why he sent Tsin Yi was because he was proficient in all kinds of formations and mechanisms. Chu Luiyue originally wanted to ask Tsin Yi to build a second layer of defense in addition to the normal defenses. He didn't expect that after just one morning, he would say that the situation was a little special. Chu Luiyue knew Tsin Yi's personality best. If he said that, then he must have really encountered some kind of trouble. "I'll go with you." The two of them had just walked out of the Yu residence when they bumped into two people. The person in front was wearing a colorful dress. Her body was slim and exquisite, and her slender and fair wrists were jingling with jade fragments. It was little Hachi. "Master." Seeing Chu Luiyue, little Hachi's eyes lit up, and she immediately went up to him. "Master, little Hachi missed you so much." Her voice was soft and charming, and her beautiful eyes blinked lightly. They were so lively that they seemed to be able to drip water. If it wasn't for her big brother standing beside her, she would have clung to Chu Luiyue directly. Chu Luiyue's mouth twitched. They had clearly not seen each other for 2 or 3 days. Those who didn't know better would think that they had been separated for 800 years. Besides, the reason why they didn't meet was because little Hachi had been busy catching up on sleep and taking care of herself. Some time ago, little Hachi and Shifang had been handling those medicinal herbs day and night in various parts of Peach Blossom Cove. They almost didn't sleep at all, and it was very tiring. Although this wasn't considered much for ordinary cultivators, it was different for little Hachi. She had always been delicate and valued her appearance. She would break down if she slept until there was a mark on her face, let alone staying up in the wind and sun every day. He heard that she had been fiddling with a lot of things to apply to her face and take a bath. "You're finally willing to come out today?" Chu Luiyue teased. Little Hachi pursed her red lips. "It's all because I've been through too much trouble recently. I've become haggard. Master, take a look. How do I look?" Chu Luiyue scrutinized her small face and nodded affirmatively. "Her beauty is unparalleled." Little Hachi was satisfied. Seeing that she was happy, Chu Luiyue looked at the young man who came with her. She had noticed this person just now. His appearance was ordinary and his figure was thin, but somehow he was somewhat familiar. Little Hachi smiled and winked. Could it be that Master couldn't recognize him? Chu Luiyue looked at it carefully again. Lin Qifei. The young man suddenly raised his hand and took off a thin mask from his face. A familiar face appeared in front of Chu Luiyue. Her eyebrows were bright and clear, indifferent and cold. Her clear and shallow eyes were suffused with a faint light. It was Lin Qifei. "Greetings, Princess." Lin Qifei stepped forward and saluted with a fist salute. "It's really you?" Chu Luiyue couldn't help but laugh. No wonder she found him familiar. "Why are you here?" "Of course I brought you in." Before Lin Qifei could explain, little Hachi spoke first with a smile. "Originally, I thought that after staying in the house for a few days, I would come out for a walk to get some fresh air. I heard that someone was outside the city gate, so I went to take a look. It was an acquaintance, so I brought you here." At this time, almost no one came to Peach Blossom Cove. Therefore, when someone suddenly came alone, the people in charge of guarding the city gate were naturally very vigilant. Lin Qifei didn't hide his identity, but the city gate was heavily guarded, so naturally they had to check carefully. In the end, little Hachi happened to go over and helped Lin Qifei out by bringing him here. Speaking of which, Lin Qifei and she were not familiar with each other. But she knew that Lin Qifei was working for Chu Luiyue, so naturally she treated him as one of her own. As for that face, Little 8 had relied purely on the aura on his body to identify him. She had always been good at this, so recognizing a person was nothing to her. Lin Qifei bowed. "I heard that Princess had won a great victory in Peach Blossom Cove, so I came specially. What happened a while ago had already spread throughout the entire world of God. Of course, Lin Qifei had also heard about it." Chu Luiyue's smile deepened. "I originally said that I would let you come over after everything was settled here. I didn't expect you to act so quickly." In fact, Chu Luiyue had her own considerations. Lin Qifei's identity was somewhat special. The Lin family was one of the 28 branches of the Yuntian Tower. Logically speaking, Lin Qifei was a member of the Yuntian Tower. Although he had started to follow Chu Luiyue before, at that time Chu Luiyue was still the princess of the Yuntian Tower. But now it was different. In addition to her identity as the princess, Chu Luiyue was also the lord of Peach Blossom Cove. His coming to Peach Blossom Cove meant that he had completely defected to Chu Luiyue. Although Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu were already husband and wife, Peach Blossom Cove and the Yuntian Tower were ultimately independent of each other. Lin Qifei's actions. Clearly he had already made his decision. Chu Luiyue paused for a moment and waved his hand. "You came at the right time. Come with me to the Gate Realm to take a look." He was also extremely talented in this area. Perhaps he could really come in handy. Lin Qifei acknowledged respectfully. Chu Luiyue then looked at Little Hachi. "Little Hachi, do you want to come with us?" Little Hachi wanted to refuse, but on second thought, there was nothing to do when she went back. She had gone through so much trouble to recover her complexion and had even put on exquisite makeup. How could she go back just like that? That would be such a waste. Therefore, after much consideration, Little Hachi decided to go. When she smiled, her eyes were charming, but the temperament between her eyebrows revealed a hint of innocence. When the two different kinds of beauty were mixed together, it was especially captivating. She was indeed a natural beauty. She walked leisurely to Lin Qifei's side. "After all, I was the one who brought Mr. Lin in. Naturally, it's best to accompany him." Occasionally, when she was in a good mood, she liked to make such jokes and tease people. Chu Luiyue knew her best. He did not mind and nodded. "Okay, then we... Yanqing? When did you come back?" Digression, 6 o'clock mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1983. Chu Luiyue looked at Yanqing, who was walking out from the corner of the street. According to Rong Xiu, Yan Qing went to send the people from Yuntian Tower out of the city today. Some time ago, Rong Xiu secretly sent many people from Yuntian Tower over because he expected that the Nan family would make a move. Now that everything was settled, there was no point for them to stay here. Rong Xiu sent them back, leaving only a small number of them. She didn't expect to meet him so coincidentally. Yan Qing walked over. Little Hachi's back was to him. When she heard his name, she couldn't help but freeze. Although she didn't look back, she could still hear the footsteps approaching. She clenched her fist subconsciously. "Greetings, Your Highness." Yan Qing stood still and bowed respectfully. He was standing not far away from Little Hachi and Lin Qifei. Little Eight glanced out of the corner of his eye and saw the tall and straight figure dressed in black martial arts attire. She didn't know why, but she was very nervous. "I just sent the last group of people out," Yan Qing said. Chu Luiyue nodded. Yan Qing had always been a straightforward person. "What is Your Highness?" Yan Qing saw that they seemed to have some plans. He thought for a while and asked. Chu Luiyue's lips curved up slightly. "Nothing. There's something going on in the Gate Realm. I want to see it for myself. I'll be back soon. You can continue with your work," Yan Qing responded. Then he looked at Little Hachi and Lin Qifei, who were standing at the side. Little Hachi could even feel his gaze, which was almost tangible, sweeping over her body. Her entire body tensed up. For a moment she didn't dare to look up and meet Yan Qing's eyes. However, Yan Qing's gaze didn't stop at all. It was like flowing water. "So it's young Master Lin." Yan Qing gently nodded in acknowledgement. Lin Qifei also returned the gesture politely. "Greetings, Madame Yan Qing." Yan Qing naturally knew that Lin Qifei was Chu Luiyue's man. After greeting him, she didn't ask any more questions and turned to leave. It wasn't until his figure disappeared through the main doors of the Yu residence that Chu Luiyue suddenly thought of something. He turned his head to look strangely. Just now, it seemed that Yan Qing didn't greet Little Hachi? That wasn't it either. He simply nodded at Sunny. Furthermore, it seemed like Little Hachi didn't want to talk to him, so he didn't say anything else. The two of them already had a conflict and they might even be fighting, Chu Luiyue thought to himself. Yan Qing was not a stingy person. He looked very magnanimous and upright. On the other hand, Little Hachi seemed a little awkward after coming over from Yan Qing. The reason why Yan Qing didn't take the initiative to greet her was probably because he was worried that it would make Little Hachi even more unhappy. Although he was a man of few words and had a cold personality, he had always been very smart. Otherwise, Rong Xiu wouldn't have placed him in such an important position. Chu Luiyue rubbed his forehead, feeling a headache coming on. In the end, he decided to throw this matter to the back of his mind. He didn't care about them anymore. Although Little Hachi was occasionally a little spoiled and willful, she always knew her limits. Even if she had some conflict with Yan Qing, according to Yan Qing's ice-cold personality, after dealing with it for a while, Little Hachi would probably feel that it was meaningless and leave it unsettled. "Let's go and take a look at the door world." Chu Luiyue walked forward. Sun Yi and Lin Qifei followed closely behind. Little Hachi, on the other hand, stood where she was, seemingly in a daze. No one knew what she was thinking. After Chu Luiyue walked some distance, he realized that she wasn't following him. He turned around and called out to her. "Little Hachi?" Little Hachi came back to her senses. "It's him? Oh, I'm coming." As she spoke, she quickly walked over. But this time she didn't stand by Lin Qifei's side. Instead, she obediently followed behind Sunny. Chu Luiyue looked at her thoughtfully. After a while, he put away his thoughts and turned to walk in the direction of the door world. On the other side, Yan Qing returned to the Yu residence. His footsteps were calm, and his handsome and cold face was expressionless as usual. Only his eyes seemed to have a slight ripple in them. "Yan Qing? Yan Qing." A familiar voice rang out. Yan Qing raised his head. Umo had appeared in front of him without him noticing. At this moment, he was looking at him with a puzzled expression and waving his hand in front of his eyes. "What are you thinking about? You're so engrossed." Umo had come with the soldiers of Yuntian Tower a few days ago. However, he had always kept a low profile and didn't appear in front of others. Even in the Yu residence, many people didn't know of Umo's existence. Most of the time he was only responsible for reporting the news outside to his master, and then passing down the orders. Because some of these things were rather secretive, he had also deliberately reduced his presence. However, this was the inner courtyard and this was Yan Qing's residence. Normal people wouldn't come here. That was why Umo came out directly. Yan Qing took a step and went around him. Nothing. His personality had always been cold. He might not even answer 3 questions. Yuemo was already used to it. However, his state was really a little strange. The two of them had been colleagues for many years and knew each other very well. Yuemo was sure that something must have happened to Yanqing. He quickly followed him. Didn't you go to send someone off today? Could it be that something is not going well? Yanqing looked at him indifferently and didn't say anything. However, his meaning was very obvious. Yuemo scratched his head. He also felt that this guess was too ridiculous. Those who went to send off were Yuntian Tower's own people. Yanqing's status was noble, so those people didn't dare to act rashly. Then, there didn't seem to be any other reason? Ever since the princess consort won the battle with Yi Wentao, the atmosphere in Peach Blossom Dock became very lively and cheerful. The unity of the people in the city and their belief in her was beyond imagination. Everything in Peach Blossom Dock was developing in a better direction without them interfering. The princess consort was in a good mood, so was His Highness. He was even more amiable to them. What was there to worry about on such a good day? Yanqing walked to the stone bench in the courtyard and sat down. His eyes were slightly lowered as if he was thinking about something. Yuemo followed him and poured himself a cup of tea. We're all brothers. If you have any difficulties, just tell me. There's no need to be polite between us. This sentence seemed to have convinced Yanqing. His heart moved slightly, and he looked up at Yuemo. Yuemo was drinking tea. The fragrance of the tea was rich and refreshing. Yanqing was Rongxiu's confidant and was treated very well in the Yu residence. Sanson specially ordered people to send him many good things. Yuemo was sighing with emotion when he heard Yanqing suddenly say, "Do you think young Master Lin is good-looking?" Yuemo spat out the tea in his mouth. In an instant, the tea stains splashed all over his body. However, he couldn't care less at this time. He widened his eyes and looked at Yanqing in horror. What did you say? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1984. Yanqing seemed to be deep in thought. I heard that fourth young Master Lin was liked by many girls at Heavenly Cave Cliff. However, his marriage was delayed because of his weak body. Although these matters were fragmented, the information that Yanqing had in his hands was far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to stay by Rongxiu's side for so long and deal with everything neatly. Yuemo spat out the tea leaves in his mouth with difficulty. You said Lin Qifei? Fourth young Master Lin of Heavenly Cave Cliff was Lin Qifei. But the point was, why did Yanqing suddenly mention him and ask if he was good-looking? Yuemo looked at him as if he had seen a ghost. What does it have to do with you whether he's good-looking or not? No, Yanqing, are you okay? This wasn't the Yanqing he knew at all. This guy usually didn't even care if a woman was good-looking or not, but now he was asking a man. Yuemo's eyes gradually turned from shock and confusion to horror. Wait. You can't be. He suddenly thought of something and threw the teacup in his hand away. He covered his chest with his hands and was nervous and on the verge of breaking down. Damn it. Could it be that Yanqing has always liked men? We used to live and eat together for many years. Yuemo felt like he was going crazy at the thought of this. Yanqing frowned, and the disdain on his face was overwhelming. Even if I really like men, you're not worthy of it. Yuemo was speechless. So, he misunderstood? But why did this sound so awkward? Seeing Yanqing's eyes, Yuemo realized what he was doing and felt embarrassed. Ahem. It's a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding. He let go of his hand and touched his nose awkwardly. I'm doing this out of concern for my brother. Yanqing frowned even harder, and a rare look of annoyance flashed in his eyes. He must be confused to ask Yuemo this question. Who knew how far that brain of his could go? Thinking of this, he felt inexplicably frustrated, so he stood up and left. Why are you leaving? He hadn't finished speaking yet. Seeing that Yanqing was about to leave, he hurriedly followed her, but he didn't dare to get too close. I'm sorry, okay? Tell me about it. Bang. Yanqing walked into the room and closed the door, cutting off the noise. Hiss. Yuemo sucked in a breath of cold air and covered his nose. So painful. This brat really didn't hold back. Moreover, why was he so irritable today? Who provoked him? Yuemo felt wronged, but he wasn't angry. There was something wrong with Yanqing's behavior. Perhaps, should he investigate from other aspects? Chu Luiyue and the others were extremely fast. After about an hour, they arrived at the gate of the Peach Blossom Cove. From afar, a huge curtain of light fell from the sky. A powerful and vast pressure faintly spread from it. This was the gate, and also the existence that connected the outside world of the divine ruins. When the guards of the Yu residence who had been guarding here saw Chu Luiyue and the others arrive, they all bowed. "Greetings, Master Yu." Chu Luiyue nodded, indicating that they didn't need to be so polite. These people were all personally selected by Sanson, and they were all trustworthy. She sized up the gate for a while but didn't find anything unusual. "Sin Yi, you said that the situation here is special. What's going on?" Sin Yi walked forward for a distance and was only a step away from the gate. It was within reach. "Master, come over and take a look." Chu Luiyue walked over with doubts in her heart. It wasn't until she stood in this position that she finally saw what was wrong with the gate. The power fluctuations of this gate didn't seem normal. Chu Luiyue stretched out her hand. Just as her slender fingers touched the faintly shining curtain of light, ripples spread out. A dangerous aura suddenly swept out from the curtain of light. Chu Luiyue's heart trembled, and a reddish-gold flame quickly surged out. But in the next moment, that ball of flame seemed to be pulled into the curtain of light by an invisible hand. Boom. Sparks flew everywhere. "Master, be careful." Sin Yi seemed to have expected this, and he directly took action, setting up a green barrier in front of Chu Luiyue. Fine sparks splashed onto the barrier, producing ear-piercing sizzling sounds before they were quickly extinguished. And at this moment that ball of flame had completely disappeared. Only the ripples were left on the curtain of light. Chu Luiyue held her breath. At this moment she realized that these ripples had gathered together to form a whirlpool. This whirlpool was extremely shallow, and it was almost impossible to see it from the front. If it hadn't swallowed that ball of flame just now, Chu Luiyue wouldn't have noticed it either. Soon the whirlpool gradually calmed down, and it returned to its original calm state. It was as if everything just now was just an illusion. Chu Luiyue frowned. This gate realm was indeed different from ordinary gate realms. Inside, it contained an extremely dangerous power. Chu Luiyue didn't doubt that if someone passed by now, their ending would be exactly the same as that ball of flame that had been swallowed. At that time, it would be hard to say whether they would live or die. Such a gate realm was extremely dangerous and it couldn't function normally at all. No wonder Sin Yi insisted on inviting her over to take a look personally. This gate realm, when did it become like this? Chu Luiyue turned around and looked at the few people in charge of guarding it. The person in front hurriedly said, in reply to Master Yu, "This situation didn't happen suddenly. Ever since the people of Black Sword Sect were all killed, we came here to replace them." On the first day this gate realm was still fine, but as time passed it gradually changed. Until yesterday, it was completely impossible to enter or leave. Originally we wanted to report it today, but Lord Sin Yi happened to be here, so they couldn't be blamed for not discovering it in time. During this period of time, the entire Peach Blossom Dock was under martial law, and no one was allowed to enter or leave as they pleased. The gate realm was also completely sealed off. They were only in charge of guarding it, and this change happened silently. There were almost no flaws on the surface, so it was normal that they only found out now. Chu Luiyue looked at Sin Yi. "What do you think?" Sin Yi paused for a moment. "I guess that perhaps this is caused by an external force." It was just a few words, but they contained a lot of information. Because this wasn't an ordinary barrier, but a gate realm. This light screen was naturally formed and had existed for 10,000 years. Who could have such a powerful force to affect it to such an extent? Suddenly a voice sounded. "There's a Xian formation hidden in this gate realm." Chu Luiyue turned and saw that Lin Qifei had also walked over at some point. He was standing in front of the gate realm and staring at it. Her heart skipped a beat. "Why do you say that?" Digression. The 5th update is at 6:30 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1985. Lin Qifei pursed his lips. "I have a feeling." He couldn't produce any evidence yet, but he just had this feeling. It was subtle but also very clear. Chu Luiyue followed his gaze. At this moment, the ripples on the door realm had completely calmed down. Seeing that Chu Luiyue didn't say anything, Lin Qifei thought she didn't believe him and continued. "I've entered the door realm many times, so I have some understanding of it. This door realm is indeed different from ordinary door realms, and this difference is very likely caused by Xian formations." "You've broken through to the Great Xian realm?" Chu Luiyue suddenly asked. Lin Qifei was startled, and a hint of surprise flashed through his eyes. Seeing his reaction, Chu Luiyue immediately confirmed her guess. "As expected, when did this happen?" Everyone turned to look at them. Lin Qifei was only in his early 20s and looked very young. In addition, he had been ill for many years and his body was weak and thin, making him look like a frail scholar. Now, Chu Liwei actually said he was a great Shen realm master. How could this not shock everyone? Even Sun Yi was a little surprised and he stared at Lin Qifei. Although he knew that Lin Qifei was very talented in this area, he didn't expect him to break through again in such a short time. 10 days ago, Lin Qifei said honestly. Actually, at that time he had already heard some news about Peach Blossom Dock and wanted to come directly, but he happened to be on the verge of a breakthrough, so he delayed it for a while. Although he knew that this side didn't lack his combat strength, he still had the intention. Chu Liwei exhaled softly, looking at Lin Qifei with undisguised admiration. She had long known that Lin Qifei was shockingly talented in this area, and he wasn't inferior to her at all. Lin Qifei could recognize this largely because he knew more about the Door realm than Chu Liwei. But at the same time, his terrifyingly sharp senses were of great help. You said that there is a Shen formation inside, then? Can you find out what kind of Shen formation it is? Lin Qifei shook his head. I can't tell for now. He could feel the existence of a profound formation, but he was unable to make a more detailed judgment based on this feeling alone. This was within Chu Liu's expectations, so she wasn't disappointed and just nodded. It's okay. Since they had already found some clues, there was definitely still hope. She looked at the gate realm in front of her again and narrowed her eyes. Shen formation. Naturally, such a thing wouldn't appear in the gate realm out of nowhere. But who could it be? Family. The news of Yi Wentao's return spread like wildfire. However, no one was able to see him. This was because Yi Wentao had returned to his residence as soon as he returned. He only told the others that he needed to rest for a period of time. During this time he would not meet with anyone. Actually, this was easy to understand. Everyone in the family Yi had seen how badly he had been injured that day. Moreover, after this battle, his face could be considered to have been completely lost. He could no longer raise his head in front of the family Yi. It was not hard to imagine that facing anyone in the family Yi at this time would be a great torture for him. Of course, Yi Wentao's residence had been changed. After all, he was no longer the family head. Jun Jiuqing had specially arranged for an extremely remote corner for him. To Yi Wentao this was humiliating but also the best choice. Because this way he could really avoid meeting the family Yi, and he wouldn't have to care about the various gazes. Jun Jiuqing only asked the two elders who had returned with him to guard him. No one in the family Yi had expected that Yi Wentao, who had been in high spirits not long ago, would return to the family Yi in such a situation. Dusk fell and the moon was in the middle of the sky. Yi Wentao lay alone on the bed. The bitter smell of medicine filled the room. On the table next to him was a wooden box. A pill lay quietly in it. The medicinal fragrance was emitted from it. Jun Jiuqing had specially left it for him to heal his injuries. But after Yi Wentao returned, he lay in bed from day to night without taking the pill. He opened his eyes and stared at the ceiling. He seemed to be looking at the patterns on the ceiling, but also seemed to be lost in thought, looking through them to see something else. Family head. Suddenly, a series of familiar footsteps came from outside the door, followed by the elder's respectful salute. Yi Wentao did not move. Naturally, he was not addressed as family head. I'll go in and take a look. Jun Jiuqing's voice was cold and indifferent. You can leave first. The two elders took turns to be on duty, so there was only one person outside the door. His words were not to be questioned. The elder quickly replied. Yes. Soon Jun Jiuqing pushed the door open and entered. Yi Wentao closed his eyes. Jun Jiuqing glanced at him, turned around, locked the door, and set up a barrier to ensure that their voices would not be heard. Only then did he speak. Have you thought it through? Yi Wentao did not speak. Obviously he did not want to pay attention to him. Jun Jiuqing was not in a hurry. He walked to the side of the bed not far away. He tilted his head and carefully looked at Yi Wentao for a while. Suddenly he curved his lips without a smile. It seems that you are quite confident in yourself and think that you can fight back? Family head, I have always respected you, but I did not expect that you would still be so naive. He gently knocked on the table. You know the origin of that shield, right? Or should I ask, when did you come into contact with that person from Black Demon Cave? Yi Wentao suddenly opened his eyes. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1986. Yi Wentao's eyes were filled with shock. He wanted to deny it, but when he looked up, he met Jun Jiuqing's gaze that was full of scrutiny, as if he had seen through everything. This made Yi Wentao's heart slowly turn cold. I really underestimated you. To be able to ask such a question, it was enough to show that Jun Jiuqing knew much more than he thought. He didn't see it at all before this. If he had known, he would have been on guard against him. Patriarch, you flatter me. I was just casually guessing. As for the truth, it's better for you to tell me personally. As Jun Jiuqing spoke, he directly sat down beside him. It seemed that if Yi Wentao didn't give him a satisfactory answer today, he wouldn't leave. Patriarch, you've done your best for family Yi for so many years, but in the end, you've fallen into such a situation. Even I feel sorry for you. Jun Jiuqing's words were like sharp blades, ruthlessly stabbing into Yi Wentao's heart. Just tell me what you want and I'll get it for you. What do you think? Yi Wentao sneered in his heart. That was a nice way to put it. Jun Jiuqing was just doing it for himself. The room fell into a dead silence. Yi Wentao didn't say a word and Jun Jiuqing didn't say anything either. The two of them faced each other silently. In the dark night, this kind of silence was almost suffocating. After an unknown period of time, Yi Wentao finally closed his eyes. She's holding the armillary shield. Jun Jiuqing looked up and there seemed to be a glimmer in his eyes. Armillary shield? He had heard of all the famous divine weapons in the divine ruins, but he had never heard of this before. However, if it could make Yi Wentao go to such lengths, it must be an extremely precious item. According to Chu Luiyue, Yi Wentao seemed to be doing it for Peach Blossom Cove, but in reality he was after the armillary shield. If that's the case, then, what kind of existence was this armillary shield? How could it attract Yi Wentao more than the Peach Blossom Dock? I wonder what kind of treasure the armillary heaven's shield is for the patriarch to yearn for it so much? Jun Jiuqing asked. Yi Wentao suddenly laughed and turned to look at Jun Jiuqing. His scarlet eyes flickered with a bloodthirsty glimmer in the dark night, making people shudder. Then, his low and hoarse voice rang out in the room. I don't know about the rest, but once I have the armillary heaven shield, I have a high chance of becoming a god. His voice was very low, as if it would disappear in the wind at any moment. However, Jun Jiuqing heard it clearly. His brows furrowed. There were beings of a higher level than Her Eminence. However, in the Divine Ruins world, it had already been 10,000 years since anyone had broken through this shackle. All the cultivators were trapped in the Her Eminence realm. No matter how hard they cultivated, they could not advance to the next level. But now, Yi Wentao actually said, with the armillary heaven shield he could become a god? No wonder he cared so much. There were millions of cultivators in the world. Who didn't want to become stronger? It was even more so for a top god like Yi Wentao. He had seen too many things in the secular world and he didn't care at all. The only thing that could make him crazy was this. If this news was known to others, it would probably cause a huge storm. But, who could be sure about this kind of thing? Could he just rely on a shield to cut the rope that had bound him for 10,000 years? Jun Jiuqing remained doubtful. But he didn't completely deny this possibility. There was no smoke without fire. Yi Wentao was willing to make such a big move, which proved that he had a certain basis. Otherwise, according to his cautious personality, he wouldn't act so rashly. Yi Wentao looked at Jun Jiuqing's changing expression and laughed softly. Ha, you say, who wouldn't want such a thing? Nan Yifan doesn't know about this. Jun Jiuqing interrupted him and said lightly. This was not a question but a statement of certainty. Yi Wentao wasn't surprised that he could guess. After all, the series of events in the Nan family during this period was enough to explain everything. If Nan Yifan knew this, he wouldn't have taken such a risk. Then, the news about the armillary heaven shield, did the patriarch hear it from the Black Demon Cave? Jun Jiuqing suddenly thought of something. He raised his eyes and stared at him. Yi Wentao took a deep breath. That's right. That's strange. How could the one in the Black Demon Cave be willing to tell the patriarch of the Black Demon Cave such important information? He seems to need this more, right? Jun Jiuqing asked with interest. You know a lot. Yi Wentao looked at him meaningfully, but he wasn't shocked. Ever since Jun Jiuqing asked that question, he knew that Jun Jiuqing knew a lot. Of course, I didn't get this news for free. I got it in exchange. Jun Jiuqing narrowed his eyes. The patriarch is so capable to get such news. I wonder, what did you exchange for it? Yi Wentao sneered. How do you think he escaped from Rongxiu a few years ago? Peach Blossom Dock, you mention. There were a few peach trees in the courtyard. Under the peach trees there was a green rattan chair. At this moment a person was half lying on it. A breeze blew and the pink and white peach blossoms fell, making the person's clothes look whiter than snow. His eyes were closed and his facial features were clear and handsome. He was perfect. From afar, he looked as if the heavens had used the best jade to carve him. He didn't look like a human being. When Yuemo walked in, he saw such a scene. He had been with Rong Xiu for many years, and he was already used to His Highness's peerless appearance. But when he looked at him again, a thought suddenly appeared in his mind. If Yanqing was really gay, then he should like His Highness, right? Is there a man in this world who is more good-looking than His Highness? No, His Highness can no longer be described as good-looking. He's simply, just as Yuemo was letting his imagination run wild, Rong Xiu opened his eyes. He looked over and happened to see Yuemo staring at him with a thoughtful expression, and the look in his eyes was even more. Rong Xiu narrowed his eyes. Yuemo suddenly felt a chill. He finally came back to his senses and looked over. He met His Highness's eyes. He immediately shuddered. It's so cold. His Highness's eyes are so scary. He originally wanted to run away, but his strong desire to live ultimately urged Yuemo forward. Your Highness, the matter you asked me to investigate has been found. Rong Xiu sat up. Speak. Yuemo's expression was solemn as he bowed. Your guess is correct. A few years ago, there were indeed a portion of those who fought against you who were not from the Black Demon Cave. He paused for a moment, then continued. 3 of them were from Family E. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1987. These men are Yi Wentao's men of sacrifice and they only obey him. Even many people in the family Yi don't know about their existence. Therefore, most people in the family Yi don't know about what happened back then. 3 men. Although it didn't sound like a lot, they were all very powerful. Otherwise, Rong Xiu wouldn't have specially sent him to investigate this matter. In the years since then, Yi Wentao has been very cautious and hasn't summoned any of his men of sacrifice. That's why we haven't been able to find out that Family Yi is behind this. Until this time, when Yi Wentao was seriously injured and Jun Jiuqing took over the position of family head, he finally made a move. We followed the vine to the melon and found out about this. Although Yuemo was usually lively and liked to joke, he was very reliable when it came to serious matters. Rong Xiu had handed this matter to him a few years ago. In between he had tried countless methods but to no avail. However, he didn't give up. When he found out that Family E had come to Peach Blossom Dock, he quickly sent more men to continue the investigation. Now there was finally a result. Rong Xiu nodded. His thin lips curled slightly, but there was no surprise in his eyes. He had indeed guessed this possibility long ago. At that time, he had chosen to go to Black Demon Cave only after he had a precise understanding of their strength. However, when he arrived, he found that the actual situation was somewhat different from what he had expected. Although it didn't have much of an impact on the final result, but Rong Xiu had put this matter on his tab. In the world of divine ruins, there are very few people who have this ability. It wasn't hard to guess, but the key was to find evidence. Rong Xiu smiled faintly. There seemed to be a thin layer of coldness between his brows. Yi Wentao was also a strong-willed man. Ever since then, he hadn't had the slightest contact with his men of sacrifice for such a long time. He had even cut off all contact with those who weren't sent to Black Demon Cave. It wasn't easy to nurture these people. The fact that he was willing to spend so much on them showed how tempting it was. Yi Wentao knew that Rong Xiu would inevitably suspect him, so he had been very careful with his words and actions. If it wasn't for the fact that he was forced into a corner and had no other choice, he probably wouldn't have used this trump card. It seems that his life and family isn't too good. As Rong Xiu spoke, he suddenly recalled how Chu Luiwei raised his eyebrows and smiled. He couldn't help but smile. Speaking of which, I still have to thank you for this matter. If she hadn't given Yi Wentao a few fierce medicine in succession and completely stunned him, things wouldn't have progressed so smoothly. Then, what do you mean? Let's just wait and see. Rong Xiu lay back on the rattan chair and waved his hand casually, as if he did not care about these things at all. Yuemo was a little surprised. After all, this investigation had been going on for several years. He thought that His Highness would definitely counterattack after getting the evidence. Let Family Yi deal with it themselves. Rong Xiu said lightly. Jun Jiuqing and Yi Wentao, there was still a fight. Yuemo's eyes lit up. He immediately understood something. Your Highness is wise. Seeing that Rong Xiu seemed to be planning to rest, Yuemo wanted to take his leave. However, he suddenly recalled Yanqing's strange behavior and hesitated. Just say what you want to say. Rong Xiu saw through his thoughts. Uemo scratched his head in embarrassment. Your Highness, it's actually nothing. It's just that. I feel that Yen Qing has been acting a little strange recently. Did he suffer a blow during this period? Rong Xiu's lips curved up into a light smile. Don't worry. That's what he deserves, Yi Zichen said. Digression. I'll be back at 6. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.